Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This is our Retirement Plan University. Today is November 11th, Veterans Day. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Jill Shea. I'm a plan advisor with WealthSpire, and I am going to be your host today. And I'm so delighted to share with you so much information today. The fortunate part for me about having a virtual education like today is that I get to handpick the presenters, and they can be throughout the country, and they are going to give you so much great content to help you as fiduciaries. So whether you have today off, thank you for being here, or whether you're working or multitasking, I hope to keep this very lively and sincere today to help you in your training as a fiduciary. Again, my name is Jill Shea. I'm a vice president here. I do client work. I'm fortunate enough to work with many clients. I've been doing this since 1992. So I am a qualified retirement plan expert working with plans in all different sizes. So I am going to thank my sponsors on the next page. We have many sponsors, and those you can see their name, including I'm not going to list them all, but from A, Alliance Bernstein, to V, Voya, and everywhere in between. Thank you so much for our sponsors. Retirement Plan University has 4 virtual events and then throughout the country. So please do, I'm going to say this here, use LinkedIn to link in with WealthSpire because you'll be in the loop with how many retirement plan universities there are. Our goal is really to educate you as a fiduciary. So let's go ahead and get started on slide 4 and then into slide 5 about Retirement Plan University. What a great opportunity to hear from a long list of esteemed experts today. We cover so many items from ERISA to non-ERISA, which is non-qualified plans. So we really want you to understand retirement basics from the ground up, regardless of what level you are at your job. This is going to give you great information. Retirement plan basics to fiduciary responsibilities. And it's important, even if you are just starting as a fiduciary or starting in a human resources or finance department at a company, you ultimately will someday be a fiduciary to a plan. And I know the information and the building blocks you're going to be learning today are going to be helping you both today and in the future. And then how fortunate we are right after the break at 10:20, we have a colleague, Amanda, who's going to talk to you about what you need to know in 30 minutes to be an expert in wealth management. So whether you're a fiduciary learning about plan documents this morning with John Nelson, or you want to learn more about your own retirement plan, you're in the right place. We're going to learn about employee engagement, risk management, of course. We're going to have Megan Nail here to talk about compensation. She's an excellent resource to learn more about how to measure compensation at your company. Compensation does include 401k and 403b plans, my favorite topic in the world. So we're so fortunate to have her discussing these. So here's the agenda for today. We're going to start up with ERISA 101, one of my favorite people, John Nelson. So if you're thinking university, he's the professor today. He's going to be talking about plan documents. And I know this is going to be new information for you. Even if you're an expert in your own plan document, he's going to share so much great information. And then Megan Nail is going to talk about the changing landscape of compensation. It's so important to understand that 401k, 403b retirement plans are part of your compensation package, but there's so many other different items like PTO, and she's going to explain how to really take those all into consideration. We have a little break, which is great. And then we'll get back to wealth management. As I mentioned, I'm so excited to hear Amanda educate you on what you need to know in 30 minutes. And then I'll be tag teaming with a member of the Fidelity team. And we're going to talk about what plan sponsors really should be thinking about in the future. See, notice that wild K. So are these wild ideas, or are these going to be mainstream ideas someday? And then lastly, we're going to end with a colleague who's going to talk about strategies for leadership, how to make sure your leaders, your top talent, are taken care of. And then we'll close up. So it's going to be a great day today. I'm very excited about today, if you can't tell. And I know you're going to learn so much important items. So now I'm on slide 8, and I'm so excited to start with John Nelson. John knows this. He is one of my favorite people. He is a former practicing ERISA attorney, but he's a current ERISA attorney. He's a wealth of knowledge on all things ERISA, which is the daily discussion in my head, my world, with my clients. And so I'm fortunate to call John a coworker, and he knows how much I adore him. And he's focusing today on plan documents. I know this is going to be valuable for you, whether you've seen a plan document before or you haven't seen a plan document before. This is the backbone of your retirement plan. So I get to turn this over to John Nelson, and he is spending a half hour on this discussion. So welcome, John. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks, Jill. Thanks for that kind introduction. Thanks to everybody for joining today. Happy Veterans Day. Shout out to all our veterans. I'd be remiss if we didn't mention the sacrifice they make for our country, and heartfelt thanks to all the veterans out there. Let's go on to the next slide then, if we could, Karina. So as Jill mentioned, what I want to focus on today are retirement plan documents. The reason I want to talk about that is because there are 2 laws that govern qualified plans. Sometimes I like to start this discussion with the old adage, you've heard many times, no good deed to help with your coworkers' welfare. But when you set up the retirement plan, though, that comes with responsibility. So hence, no good deed setting up the plan goes unpunished. The rules you have to comply with. There's 2 rules. We've mentioned ERISA a couple times, Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. I remember, I'm old enough to remember 1974. Jerry Ford was the president. ERISA was enacted. Inflation was going pretty bad, so people were encouraged to wear win buttons, said whip inflation now. And people also went out to get swine flu shots because swine flu was going around. But that's what happened in 1974, and that's when ERISA came about. And ERISA was put in place to impose rules of conduct on decision makers in regard to their company-sponsored retirement plans. So we've also talked about this term fiduciary. What does that mean? You're a fiduciary with respect to your company's retirement plan if you're a decision maker. Now, if you have a title like trustee or plan committee member, that's going to make you a fiduciary. But even if you don't have a title, if you exercise discretion, if you're a person making decisions in regard to the plan, that makes you a fiduciary. And as a fiduciary under ERISA, you have to act in the best interests of your plan participants. And the second bullet point up there, in accordance with the plan documents. And if you don't do that and the plan suffers a loss, you potentially have personal liability. That's why it's important. The second law then is the Internal Revenue Code. The IRS gives you a tax break for contributions to retirement plans, but you have to comply with the rules. And if you don't, you have what's called an operational failure, a failure to follow the terms of the plan. So once again, it's important to know what the plan says, because if you do something different than what the plan says, you expose your company to penalties. All right. That's why we want to focus on plan documents. What I want to do today is cover some areas, common problems that I see come up from time to time. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the first things I like to always ask employers when we're talking about the plan document, it seems kind of rudimentary, but think about this. I always ask, does your company have any W-2 employees who are not eligible for the plan? Now think about that. Do you have any W-2 employees, people that get W-2s, that you don't consider eligible for the plan? Generally, the answer is going to be yes. The categories might be union employees. You might be excluding part-time or temporary employees. There might be job categories, like you might be excluding interns, or you might be hiring people for a specific project and they're not eligible for the plan. So my point is, it's okay to have job categories that you don't cover under your 401k or 403b plan. But the key is, if you're excluding somebody based on a job category, check the definition of eligible employee under your plan document and make sure that in the plan document, you've put that exclusion in there. Otherwise, guess what? Those employees are eligible. And if you're not covering them, then you may have to go back and make retroactive contributions to make them whole. So I always want to start with the idea, do you have any employees you're not covering? If the answer is yes, that you don't consider benefit eligible, if the answer is yes, make sure that you're reflecting that in your plan document. Make sense? Let's go to the next slide. Another common problem that comes up from time to time is this idea of a leased employee. Now, what is a leased employee? A leased employee, that's a defined term under the Internal Revenue Code. And what it means is, it means if you have somebody working at your place of business and they're working there pretty much full time, 30 hours a week, but they're on somebody else's payroll, like a temp agency, for example. But if they're working at your place of business and they're there for 1 year, at least 1,500 hours, that's why I say 30 hours a week, even though they're not on your payroll, after 1 year, they're considered to be your employee for purposes of the retirement plan, and you have to cover them unless you exclude them. So lots of times in plan documents, we'll check the box to exclude a leased employee. Now think about that. They work at the temp agency. They're not on your payroll. If you have to cover them under your plan, think of the mechanics you have to go through to get their deferral at the payroll agency into your plan. So typically, I think if you have folks who aren't on your payroll, but they're working at your place of business full-time, that's a leased employee. Make sure your plan document excludes leased employees. Let's go to the next slide. Now, oftentimes the plan will impose eligibility conditions. Typically, the plan may have a service requirement and a minimum age requirement. Now, the longest service requirement you can impose to be eligible to participate in your company's plan is 1 year of service. Now, a year of service has a couple definitions. If you're counting hours of service, a year of service means a 12-month period during which the employee works at least 1,000 hours. Now, I want to bring that up because sometimes you may think in your mind that if you have a part-time employee, you don't have to cover them. And you may think part-time means maybe 30 hours or less per week, because oftentimes health insurance might have a 30-hour per week minimum. But in the context of the retirement plan, part-time means 20 hours a week because it's that 1,000-hour threshold. 1,000 hours divided by 50 weeks, that's about 20 hours a week. So if you're counting actual hours, a year of service means a 12-month period during which the person works at least 1,000 hours. So if they work 20 hours a week for 12 months, that's a year of service. You can't exclude them based on service. Let's go to the next slide. Now, another way to count service is what we call elapsed time. And this is a little bit easier because elapsed time simply says you look at when the employee's hire date. Let's say they hired today, November 11th, 2025. Well, 1 year from now, November 11th, 2026, if they're still on your payroll, they've completed a year of service. So you're not counting hours if you used elapsed time. So elapsed time, I think, is easier to administer. Some plan documents and some record keepers now actually require that you use elapsed time versus counting actual hours. So elapsed time simply means a year, 12 months. Now, I want to mention, though, once again, this idea of part-time. Because remember, with elapsed time, you're not counting hours of service. So actual hours are not relevant. So if you have a lot of part-time employees you don't want to cover, then you might want to consider not using elapsed time and using actual hours. But those are the differences, I think, between how you calculate a year of service, either actual hours or elapsed time. Now, before we leave this slide, I want to mention a new rule regarding what we're called long-term part-time employees. Now, the idea is if you have a part-time employee who works at least 500 hours a year. So think about that. That's 10 hours a week. So you've got a part-time employee who works at least 500 hours, and they've been with you for 2 consecutive years. So they worked 500 hours in 2025, 500 hours in 2024, 500 hours in 2025. January 1, 2026, you have to make them eligible for your plan. You can't exclude that long-term part-time employee. They have to be eligible to at least make employee contributions. Now, you don't have to make an employer contribution for them, but they have to be eligible to at least make employee contributions. And that's the case whether you're a 401k plan or a 403b plan for nonprofit. All right. So remember, that's a concept: long-term, 2 years of service, part-time, 500 hours or more. Let's go to the next slide. Now, another point I want to mention on terms of eligibility is that you can have what we call dual eligibility in your plan. What I mean by that is you can have different eligibility requirements for employee contributions, say, versus the company contribution. Like for employee contributions, 401k salary deferrals, 403b salary deferrals, you might say, you know what, it's your money. You can start contributing on your date of hire, all right, immediate eligibility. But you might want to say, maybe for the company match or for the profit sharing, we'd like you to complete some period of service before you're eligible for that. It could be 90 days, it could be 6 months. If your 401k plan is what we call a safe harbor plan. Now, a safe harbor plan, remember, that's important. When I get up on my soapbox, I think every 401k plan in the country should be a safe harbor plan. To be safe harbor, you have to make a rather nominal contribution for your employees, a 4% match or a 3% non-elective contribution. And if you do that, you buy your way out of that 401k annual non-discrimination test. So if you're safe harbor, you can always tell your key highly paid employees, under our plan, you will always be able to make the maximum 401k contribution. You'll never get a refund. That's the benefit of safe harbor. But a safe harbor plan requires that employer contribution be 100% vested. So that's a case where you might say, you know what, you can put your own money in right away, but to get the company match or the company safe harbor contribution, you have to be here for 1 year because of that immediate vesting. So just keep that in mind for your plan. You can have dual eligibility, different eligibility provisions for employee contributions, different eligibility provisions for the employer contribution. All right, let's go to the next slide. We're rolling along here, okay? Hope everybody's keeping up. Compensation. Now, compensation is a very important term under your plan document because benefits under the plan document are generally based on the participant's compensation. What does compensation mean? It usually means the employee's W-2. So once again, I ask employers, does your company exclude any items of W-2 wages from the plan? And once again, generally the answer might be yes. You know, there might be, you might pay a spot bonus. You know, if somebody's doing a good job, here's a bonus. Or you might have a holiday bonus. There might be, or non-cash wages. There might be a business expense reimbursement plan. There might be excess group term life insurance. Excuse me. But the point is, there might be items of compensation that hit your employee's W-2 that you don't count as compensation under the plan. Look at all your compensation codes in your payroll system. And if there are certain compensation codes that you don't count as wages or compensation under your plan, once again, that's okay, but make sure that your plan document is excluding those items of wages from the definition of compensation. Otherwise, guess what? Those wages count as compensation, and you will later have to do a makeup contribution for employees if you excluded items. The easy one would be a sample where your plan document does not exclude bonuses or commissions, but in operating the plan, you're not counting bonuses or commissions. That's going to be a problem. You can exclude bonuses and commissions, but make sure your plan document says that. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Karina. Thank you. Now, there are certain types of wages that hit the W-2 that I think should always be excluded with very limited exceptions. And one of those is fringe benefits. So fringe benefits, we're all familiar with that term, but that's a business term. The IRS really doesn't have a clear definition of fringe benefit. So what that means is that in administering the plan and interpreting the plan document, almost any form of wages other than regular pay can be considered by an employer as a fringe benefit. Now, I'll give you an example where this came up one time. We had a client that, as I mentioned, paid a holiday bonus. And the holiday bonus at the end of the year might be $400, might be $500, but they weren't counting that as compensation under the plan. In other words, here's your $500 bonus, but we're not withholding 401k from it, or we're not counting it in calculating the employer match or the employer contribution. All right. Now, the plan was large plan, so subject to audit. And the auditor said, look, your plan includes bonuses in the definition of compensation. So you should be including these holiday bonuses as part of the compensation under the plan. Now, we were able to go back, though, and tell the auditor, no, the employer considers that holiday bonus to be a fringe benefit, and fringe benefits are excluded. So that was fine. We solved that problem. So fringe benefit can be kind of a catch-all if you later get in trouble because you're not covering certain non-regular types of compensation. So I always suggest check that fringe benefit box. Next page. Also, if your plan has a service requirement, let's say that your plan requires that you complete 6 months of service to be eligible for the plan. Typically, I like to exclude what we call pre-entry date compensation. I'll give you an example. Here's an example of why this matters. Let's say your plan has quarterly entry dates. And let's say that Jane starts work on April 15th and her compensation is $5,000 per month. Now it's quarterly entry date, so Jane's hired on April 15th. She enters the plan on July 1st, and she elects to contribute 5% of her compensation. Now, if we measure Jane's compensation from her entry date, July 1st, her ADP, that's the non-discrimination test. Remember where we look at deferrals divided by compensation, we calculate that ADP for our non-highly compensated employees. We calculate the ADP for our highly compensated employees, and we compare the two. If we measure from entry date, Jane's ADP for testing purposes is the $1,500 that she deferred over the 6-month period divided by the $30,000 compensation she earned over the 6-month period. It's 5%. That makes sense because she's deferring 5%. But if your plan doesn't exclude pre-entry date comp, and we measure from Jane's hire date, now her ADP is 1,500 divided by 42.5. It's 3.53. Now, why is that important? It's important because in your first year, all of your employees are going to be non-highly compensated employees. And remember, to pass that 401k test, we want to get the ADP ratio for our nons as high as we can. So if we're counting comp from hire date, we're artificially lowering the ADP calculation. Okay. So we always want to exclude pre-entry date compensation. Now, if you don't have a service requirement, it's probably not important, but if you do, keep that in mind. Now, a question just came in. If they have a 1099-R and they're part-time, are they considered eligible? The answer is no. If they're getting a 1099, they're considered an independent contractor, not an employee. And as an independent contractor, they're not eligible for the plan. So it's only people getting paid on W-2s that are employees and that are eligible. Let's go to the next slide. Now, matching contributions comes up quite a bit. Let's say I get a question, it's the end of the year now, and questions will come up on whether the plan provides for a true-up contribution. Now, what's a true-up contribution? Let's say that your plan document has a match formula. We will match 50 cents on the dollar up to the first 6% of pay you contribute. So if you put in 6%, the company will put in 3%. Now, let's say we've got somebody that starts on January 1 contributing 12% of pay per pay period. They contribute 12% for the first 6 months, and then for some reason they stop deferring and contribute 0 for the next 6 months. So they contribute 12% for the first 6 months, they get the 3% match for 6 months, and then nothing for the next 6 because they're not contributing. We get to the end of the year, they've contributed 6%, but their match is only 1.5%. All right. So what we would do at the end of the year, if we have a true-up provision, is the employer would true them up and make an additional match to get them to the 3%. In other words, the deal was, we said, if you put in 6, we'll put in 3. You did put in 6. You put it in unevenly, though, so you didn't get the full match, so we'll true up at the end of the year. Now, you need to look at your plan document, because where your plan document talks about matching, it'll also define what the contribution period is for the matching contribution period. If the contribution period is each payroll period, then there is no true up under your plan document. But if it's the plan year, then the true up is required. So look back. I think plans should make true ups, but look at your plan document to see what it says in terms of the contribution period. All right. Let's go to the next slide then. Now, your plan also might provide for discretionary matches, where it says we may make a match, and if we do, we'll tell you. I just want to note that there's a notice requirement now. If your plan has a discretionary match, you have to give a notice after the end of the year to the trustee and to the plan participants. Let's go to the next slide. Now, let's say you're doing a non-elective contribution. Now, an employer non-elective contribution is just what it means. It means that you make the contribution for all eligible participants, whether they elect to make contributions or not. So it's not a match, it's a non-elective. So if I make a contribution, but Jill doesn't, we both get the non-elective. And typically the non-elective is allocated among all eligible participants in proportion to compensation. That's a safe harbor, non-discriminatory allocation. But I just want everybody to be aware that if you have a company where you want to target employer contributions to a key group of employees, you can do that. You can say, we're going to make an employer contribution, but we're going to allocate 9% to our C-suite executives and 3% for everybody else. Okay, you can do that. It requires some testing, but I just want everybody to understand, we all know that plans can't discriminate in favor of highly compensated employees. But I'm here to tell you, you can discriminate. There's ways to do it. I'll give you an example of why something like this is okay. I'm putting 9% in for the boss and 3% in for the staff. The boss is typically older. Let's say the boss is 50 years old and the staff employee is 25. What I'm going to do, if I test that plan based on contribution rates, clearly it's discriminatory. But I'm not going to test it on contribution. I'm going to test it on how much retirement benefit it will provide. And the idea is I put 9% in for the 50-year-old today. That 9% has 15 years to accumulate to age 65 and then pay a benefit. If I put 3% in for the 25-year-old, that 3% has 40 years now to grow and pay a benefit at age 65. So by comparing benefits, I can demonstrate that the contribution is non-discriminatory. So the point I want to make is, if you have a plan and you want to target key employees, you can do that. Let's go to the next slide. Forms of distributions. One of the questions that comes up quite often with former employees, now these are people that have quit, they're not your employees anymore. What do you want to do with them? Do you want to let them keep their money in the plan, or do you want them to take their money out? They're not your employee anymore. Pros to staying in the plan: scale. More assets typically means lower fees. The cons, there's increased potential for missing participants. There's the potential for higher or record-keeping fees if it's based on per participant. But what is your policy? What do you want to do with former employees? Stay in the plan or take your money and go? Let's go to the next slide. If you want to encourage former employees to keep their money in the plan, then look at the form of distribution under your plan document. Under the form of distribution, you would want to provide flexibility. You'd want to let people do partial withdrawals. I can take some money out. I don't have to take it all out. But if you want to get rid of folks, then you want to change your form of distribution to lump sum only. All right, so you can take your money out, but your only option is lump sum. Okay, so that's just some things to think about in terms of forms of distribution. Do you want to let people stay in, or do you want to encourage them to go? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Next slide. Karina, can you get to the next slide? Hello? Did something happen? Nick, can you hear me okay? Did I lose that? Or am I? Okay, here we go. Non-discrimination testing. Okay, we're back in. All right, here we go. Okay, so non-discrimination testing. There's also this concept of called highly compensated employee. Now remember, in the world of qualified plans, there's two kinds of employees. There's a highly compensated employee and a non-highly compensated employee. A highly compensated employee is simply somebody who made more than $160,000 in 2024. That's the HCE definition for 2025. It's a look-back test. All right. So for 2025, you're an HCE if you made more than $160,000 last year. Now remember, it's a look-back test. So let's say you hire a new executive this year, and you're going to pay that person $1 million a year. In the first year, are they a highly compensated employee? The answer is no, because it's a look-back test. And last year, they made zero from your company. So your first year, everybody's going to be a non-highly compensated employee. But you can do what's called a top paid group election in your plan. So this is an option in your plan document. You can say more than 160 and be in the top 20% of employees ranked by compensation the prior year. Now, so for example, if you're a law firm or a tech company, if more than 20% of your employees make more than 160, then you always want to make that top paid group election. And once again, the reason is why. The reason is because let's say somebody's making $170,000 a year. That person is probably making large 401k deferrals. So remember, for the test, their ADP is going to be high. So I want to take, if I can, that $170,000 a year employee and push him or her down into the non-highly compensated group, once again, to help me pass the test. All right. So think about your compensation. If more than 20% of your employees make more than that threshold, make that top paid group election. Let's continue on with the next slide then. Now, another thing I want to ask people about is I always want to, sometimes there are related companies, and you can have company A, company B, they're related through common ownership. And they may both, company A may have adopted a plan, and company B's employees may be participating in that plan. That's okay, but make sure that if that's happening, company B has adopted the plan under a participation agreement or an adoption agreement. We want to make sure that that employer, that related employer who has employees participating in your company's plan, we always want to make sure that related employer has also adopted the plan. All right, makes sense? Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Now, I want to spend a few minutes here and just wrapping up. I've got a couple of minutes left. I want to just talk about this idea of forfeitures. Now, the plan can have forfeitures. Most plans will have vesting schedules for employer contributions. Excuse me. So the idea might be, I'm putting money into your account today, but you have to complete some period of service in order to be vested in that money. So like, for example, let's say the plan has a 5-year vesting schedule, 20% after 1 year, 40% after 2, 60% after 3, yada, yada. So after 5 years, you are 100% vested. Now, let's say that I put money in for your account each year and you leave after 3 years, you're 60% vested. You take 60% of the employer contribution. The other 40% forfeits and goes to the forfeiture account. Now, most companies use forfeitures to offset future employer contributions. Now, that's a decision somebody's making. And what these plaintiff attorneys are saying, there's about 75 forfeiture lawsuits that have been filed in the last few years. What the plaintiff attorneys are saying that when you make that decision, you're acting as a fiduciary of the plan. And remember, under ERISA, as a fiduciary, you have to act in the best interest of the plan participants. And what they're saying is that you should be using forfeitures not to reduce the employer contribution, which benefits the employer, but you should be using those forfeitures to pay plan expenses, which will benefit me, because as a participant, those expenses would have otherwise been charged to my account. All right, so as I mentioned, there's about 75. We've seen these cases develop. Now, most of these cases are being summarily dismissed. So what happens is the plaintiff files a lawsuit. The defendant then, the company, can come in and say, if everything you said is true, it's still not enough to state a cause of action, and the court will immediately dismiss. So district courts right now are ruling it's about a 75% win rate for plan sponsors. When the plan sponsor loses that, what's called motion to dismiss, All it means is that it doesn't mean that the plaintiffs win. It just means they can continue with the lawsuit into discovery. So I just want to mention that if you are using forfeitures to pay plan expenses, talk to your advisor about that. You may want to consider amending the plan to take away the discretion, because right now the plan says may use forfeitures to offset employer contributions or pay plan expenses. You may want to change that or consider changing it to shall use forfeitures to offset employer contributions. Take the discretion away. Okay. I'm pretty much at the end. Are there any questions or any comments? Hi, Jill.
Hi, John. That was so great. Edna says thank you, but she did ask if 1099 employees that are part-time are eligible.
Yeah, so we did talk about that. I did answer that, and the answer is if they're 1099, they're considered to be an independent contractor, not an employee, so they would not be eligible. The plan only is going to cover employees.
Okay? Thank you. Yes, I love your opening statement, no good deed goes unpunished, because whether it relates to forfeitures or even, I will tell you, a new employee who comes in and sits in the payroll seat and she's so excited about her new job and she looks down and she goes, bonuses? At the last company, we didn't include bonuses, so maybe I should change this here too. What John is saying is it's not for the payroll person to define compensation or eligibility. It's for the committee to define these things. So the plan document first, and then remember, if we make decisions as fiduciaries at the plan committee level, then now you get to turn around and tell payroll or update your benefits guide to make sure that your eligibility, compensation, any exclusions are mirroring the document in your payroll. Right, John? Is that what I learned?
Yeah. That's a good summary. Yep.
Okay. And then there's a new notice for the discretionary match. In the wisdom of these notices, it's due after the last match, correct? So not before the beginning of the year, but after the end of the year, right?
Right. So that's, once again, if you're making a discretionary match, that means your plan document doesn't define the rate match. It doesn't define the contribution period. It simply says the employer may make a match. You can make that match during the year, but following the end of the year, you need to provide a notice to both the trustee of the plan and the plan participants, telling them what the match rate was and how it was calculated.
Perfect. So really make sure that your plan document meets your needs. Companies change, companies evolve. Companies should be looking at their plan document. How often do you think they should be looking at their plan document, both for making sure it matches up, but also for making any changes? How often do you think a company should be looking at this?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea on an annual basis. I think what every company should do is maybe put together a 1 or 2 page highlight sheet that just highlights the terms of the plan. And then on an annual basis, the plan committee can review that highlight sheet and decide whether certain terms still make sense or whether certain terms might or maybe should be changed. And then keep in mind that most plans now are on what's called an IRS pre-approved plan document. Mm-hmm. That means that every 6 years, that plan document has to be completely restated. We just finished a cycle 3 restatement period. The cycle 4 restatement period will start next year, the end of 2026, and continue on through 2028. So that's also going to be a good time to review your plan document, because you will have to restate beginning next year. Here's a question that came in. Why do some employers allow a match for 401k, but not 401k Roth? I don't know the answer to that, because I think the employer should match whether the employee is electing to defer on a pre-tax basis, traditional 401k, or a post-tax basis, Roth. It shouldn't matter how the employee chooses to make their contribution, as long as they're making the 401k. So if you've got an employer out there who's matching traditional 401k but not Roth, talk to your advisor about that, because that doesn't make sense to me. Okay. Hope that's a fair answer.
It's a very fair answer. Someday you'll be able to match in Roth. Someday the company will be able to have their employer match be Roth, correct?
Well, yeah, that's a whole nother RPU.
Someday, yeah.
Yeah, the concept is employer contributions always go in pre-tax. But under the rules that are in effect right now, it's current law right now, employees can elect to treat part of their employer contribution as Roth. The problem is nobody knows how to administer that provision right now. So that's why the record keepers haven't put it in place. But that is something that may come down the road at some point. Okay.
So great. Thank you, John. Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
I learn so much every day. Thank you, John. Oh my gosh, guess who's here, everyone? Megan Nail. Woo! You are so fortunate to be able to spend the next half hour with Megan. I've gotten to know her over the last few years. I even took her compensation boot camp, which was fantastic. Again, Megan focuses on compensation. 401k, 403b plans are but up compensation. I learned this year. I thought it was everything. I mean, I thought it was everything. But the match, and as a user and an employee, of course, PTO is part of compensation too, not to mention your salary. So this is so important for you to understand where this all weaves and fits together. So I'm going to turn this over to Megan. I see on the next page is her bio. It's very impressive. She not only has experience at NFP, she has lots of qualifications, 20 years of volunteer leadership with SHRM, which is so impressive. She is definitely a community member of human resources. Her compensation boot camp, I guess she does it twice a year. So it's fantastico, Megan. Fantastic. So she has, you can see her, she's a certified employee benefits specialist. I am too. I know that's not easy either. So welcome, Megan. I'm going to turn this over to you. I'll be taking notes, but I'll be on mute. And thank you again for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jill. So I'm excited to talk to you about compensation, but just to be clear, I let John handle the definition of compensation for your plans. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about more compensation levels, a little bit higher level than that. So Karina, if you don't mind, thank you. So as Jill shared, I've been working in this area for a long time and a part of the HR community. And why I love compensation and total rewards so specifically out of the many different areas in the HR profession is because they are among some of the fastest changing areas in our workplace. When we really think about how we define, how we compete for, reward, and retain talent, no matter what type of organization we're in, from nonprofit to for-profit to public sector, this area is changing so much. So let's get a little interaction from you. I see some great interaction in the chat, so I know you know how to use that function. As Jill shared, I see total rewards really broadly, a lot of different things playing into that picture, from PTO, of course, compensation, retirement plans that we're here to learn about today, employee benefits, all of those different things. So I would get, when I was not at NFP, but more of that internal HR person, a lot of employees at my door, either physically or virtually, saying, I wish we had this, or I wish we offered this benefit or this program. So I want to hear from you in the chat. What are your employees asking for when they're sharing their wish lists of, can we offer this, or can I get more of this? What are your people looking for? I'm going to give you a second to put some things in the chat. I'll give you a few examples. Things that I often hear when I ask this question are things like pet insurance. I hear often a better 401k or retirement plan match. I hear things like more PTO, sometimes different types of leaves. Anyone willing to share what your people are looking? Dawn, that's awesome. Education reimbursements. Absolutely. Those reimbursements or maybe even some student loan repayment. I hear that as well. Thanks, Don, for getting us started. Anyone else willing to share kind of what your people are looking for in their benefits and their total rewards package? All right, let's see, more sick days that are not included with vacation time. So more PTO, that's very true. More time off and kind of in that segmented. Definitely not wanting to use vacation for sick time. All right, we will keep moving, but please continue to put any comments in the chat if you just want to share what your people are looking for. So Karina, I'll let you go to the next slide if that works. All right, so as Jill mentioned in my bio, I've been in HR for about 25 years. So I want to take you on this journey of compensation on kind of where we've been, where we're at now, and where I think we're going in the future in my crystal ball. So let's start with kind of the past and where we've been. Karina, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Thank you. And I love continuing to see the comments, more paid holidays. That's a great one. Thank you for sharing that. So when I started in compensation, roughly around the turn of the millennia, so about 25 years ago, a lot of compensation decisions were made in secrecy. So kind of in a dark room in a back corner of our organization where leaders would come together, or a group would come together and really start to say at a certain point in year, what are we going to pay people going forward? What does this look like? What types of increases, bonuses are we going to give? We didn't always know exactly what the criteria were that they were using to make those decisions. And as a compensation or the HR professional, they would come out of that room and share their plan for what the pay was going to look like for the upcoming year. Next up. So let's talk about making job offers. And again, we're going to the past. We're 25 years ago. Typically, we would ask on that employment application what their current salary is, or we used to actually ask for salary history. So when you were putting in your employment history on your job application, we would actually ask what you made at each of those different employers. Now, of course, we know you can't do that anymore. We have salary history bans, so hopefully no one is still following that practice. We know you can only ask what someone's looking to make in their new opportunity, but that's not how it used to be. We used to be able to ask exactly what they were making, and we would kind of have this simple formula for determining what we were going to offer. And it didn't come from a bad place. It was just kind of the way things were done. And that formula was somewhere around, how much more do I have to offer you over what you're currently making to get you to accept our offer? And I would often find that that was about 10% more than what you were currently making. So we were just trying to look at how much more we are going to give you compared to what you are currently making. Next up, Karina. So when we were sitting down to share the news of what the new pay rates were going to be and bonuses or incentive payments, if that was part of the package, we were typically sitting across a desk or in a room with someone. Things weren't as virtual as what they are like during this fantastic event we're at here today. And we were often handing over a physical piece of paper to someone with their new pay information. These statements that we would often create would kind of have what their current compensation is, what that percent increases or that increase amount, and then what their new pay is, along with any bonus or incentive payments. So we would be handing that over, and we would really be hoping that there weren't a lot of questions about how that was determined, because they made those decisions back in that dark room and we're not really sure what information was being relied on. So there wasn't really a lot of transparency when it came to compensation when looking at all of these different factors. And I think too, as I continue to see your comments come through on what your people are looking for in their package, that's changed a lot too over time. So as we're looking for more certification reimbursement. I love that comment. Educational reimbursement, gym memberships and things. These are different parts of what our packages are as people's expectations are changing. It wasn't really something that we saw quite as much maybe 25 years ago. All right, Karina, let's fast forward to the present. So luckily we've changed and progressed a lot from those days. So let's go to the next slide and look at where we're at. So now I would say we have more data and information than we ever have before. So there's a lot of information out there. Of course, we all know you can Google search lots of information. The quality is always a question, and where that information comes from or where that data comes from. But there's a lot of data and information out there. Many of you probably use salary surveys or compensation surveys of different types to really look at what rates are for your jobs. And there's a lot of information, but it's not always easy to tell what the quality of that information is and if it really matches what your organization's philosophy is, where you're competing for talent, and is it good, reliable data that you can use. So it's a lot to sift through. So I wanted to give you an idea of just how we commonly see this come to life with our clients. So this example is really a nonprofit client that we work with. We work with a lot of nonprofit, for-profit, all types of different clients. But they had a lot of this data. So they had a couple of different surveys from an industry group, from a local chamber group, and they're really kind of trying to understand where they should pay. They've got data, but it's kind of hard to make sense of it and really think about what works within their budget and what works for their people so they can, again, attract and retain the people they need. So it's a pretty common problem that we face. And really what our job is to come in and help to understand that, vet it, organize it, and put it into something practical and easy to use. Next up. So, our employees are talking about compensation. If we were in a live room and I could ask you all to raise your hand, and I asked you how many of you have had people talk about compensation, all the hands should go up because we know people are discussing this at some level. What's hard is if we're having a hard time really thinking about the data, explaining it, understanding it, thinking about our philosophy, it's even harder for employees. So when they're talking about, and they're, I'm going to say, comparing notes on what their pay is, what their increases, what their bonuses are, there's not context around it. That's a really challenging conversation for people to have. Next up. So we've progressed a lot from printing off paper statements. I'm sure that it still happens for some of us, but I hope most of us aren't printing all of that paper anymore to tell people what their new pay rates are. But some things stay the same. So although we're probably using an HRIS system and people can view what their pay is in that system or any pay change, when we do training with HR teams for managers on compensation, I hear time and time again, do not let your employees find out what their new pay rate is on their pay stub. So we still have some opportunities to be more proactive on how we communicate compensation, because we know our employees are talking about it. So compensation is really influenced, of course, by the economy, by the labor market, all of those different factors. But there is one huge non-economic factor that's having a big impact on this, and that's pay transparency. Pay transparency is the requirement to post your pay ranges out there on your job postings or your internal movement opportunities for your people. Next up. So this is a big movement legislatively. Now, there is nothing federally required around pay transparency. It's all at the state and local level. This is a very fast changing area. So when you get the slides and the information from the Retirement Plan University team, you'll see on this slide, there is a link where you can go and look and see what the current state is, because there are new states being added to these requirements every day. Again, these are requirements to put your pay range out there when you are posting a job. There's a lot of different locations in terms of cities, municipalities, like local areas that also have these requirements. So in addition to states, we also have requirements at the local level, just harder to represent all of those on a map. So next up, so when we look at even beyond where the current requirements are, the states that have been added in green are states that have recently or are proposing to add these types of requirements. So you can see it's really filling in the country pretty quickly on where these requirements are. So if you're not currently transparent around your compensation ranges, and even if you're not located in one of these states, people are expecting that more, and it's definitely coming your way at some point in probably the not too distant future. So whether it's a legal requirement or not, we know that employees are becoming more knowledgeable about compensation and total rewards and are really expecting a higher level of transparency from their employers on how this is all put together. So I want you to think a little bit about where you're at on a compensation transparency journey and maybe what you can do to become one step more transparent. So we'll kind of walk down my curvy road step by step here. I purposely chose a curvy road because nothing is a straight path in HR. So we'll anticipate some twists and turns here along the way. So let's start at the upper left. I think I know how much I get paid. In my experience, a lot of employees do not really even understand what their current pay package is and how that is put together. Things like the difference between gross pay and net pay. You start adding things like overtime rate, shift differentials, piece rate, incentive plans, bonuses, how all of that is calculated. So there's a lot of pieces to just the compensation puzzle. So I think our first step is really helping people to understand what their current pay is. Next up, as we kind of move to the right there, is I know my own pay range and how my pay is determined within that range. So not only do I understand what my current pay rate is, but I know what the range is for my job, and I know why I'm at where I'm at. I think it's human nature or psychology that when we see a pay range, everyone wants to be at the maximum, right? That's usually the first question is, why am I not at the maximum? So that's something that we want to make sure that we've got a clear and consistent methodology on how people are placed within that range, and we can explain that and it's applied well. Next up is I know what jobs pay throughout my organization. Sorry, Karina, if you don't mind going back one slide, that would be great. Thank you. So that's, I think, where most of us should be trying to get to that middle range within here. So understanding kind of what those jobs pay throughout the organization, at least up to a certain level of leadership. So this is a great way to tie it with career growth. So when you think about career paths and how your jobs relate together and what those future opportunities are, using pay information helps support that. And then I'll kind of skip to the end. I know how and what everyone gets paid. Generally don't advise that. Most organizations aren't going that way, but if you're in public sector or you have some friends or connections in public sector, we know they are the model of transparency by requirement, where really anyone can look up what any individual person is paid. Thank you, Karina. If you don't mind going to the next one. So compensation is money, but it's more than just money. It's a matter of fairness and trust. Whether we're talking about compensation, whether we're talking about retirement plans or health benefits or any other area, we can't value what we don't understand. So communication and understanding is critical. So when we think about communication, when it comes to compensation, and really this probably applies to other areas within total rewards as well, it's really important to think about how we're segmenting that within the different groups within our organization. So first, you probably have an executive leadership team or maybe an executive leader who is making the big picture decisions around some of these items. So they really need to have the comprehensive and detailed information to help make those decisions. You might have other decision makers who have some decision rights around compensation, maybe department leaders or area leaders, something along those lines. It's really important that they have the information to make consistent decisions. I was just with a client yesterday who was talking about a pretty common thing that we find is that some departments, some leaders, maybe I'll say kind of easier than others, maybe more willing to pay more than others. And if we have different kind of philosophies that are happening within the organization, that makes it really hard for employees to understand and to feel that fairness, trust, and consistency if they feel like they're not being treated similarly as others in the organization. You may also have managers or supervisors or team leaders who don't have access to compensation information, but who are an important resource to employees. Helping to equip them to answer some basic questions will help to build their credibility and just to build that narrative within your organization. And finally, what are employees looking for? What is my pay range? Why am I paid where I'm at? And what can I do to increase? So kind of having those simple answers ready. And again, equipping your managers to answer those questions is critical. All right, so I'm going to end with the future. We'll end on a very hopeful note here. So imagine if you felt really confident about your compensation data, your philosophy, and your approach, and you weren't dreading it when an employee came to you with a question about their pay. So imagine if your employees, instead of being confused and trying to compare notes and figure things out as they were talking about their compensation and their total rewards package, had some information and could really understand it, and were having a more valuable, helpful conversation rather than conjecture and subjective opinions. The goal of all of this is not to be the highest payer. None of you ever will be. There's always another company, another organization who will pay more than you for a position. The goal of this process and to have what I would consider a healthy compensation program is for your employees to feel that their pay is fair and to trust the process behind it. So it's not all about money, even though it's kind of what I focus on, me and my team in our daily work. It's a lot more than that. So let's talk about what else we have. So, and think about this for yourself as well. You named a lot of things in the chat: paid holidays, sick days, education, certifications. Different things mean more to different people. So let's take retirement dollars, for example. For some individuals, that may be one of the primary drivers of why they choose to work in a particular organization. For others, it may be less important than other areas. Benefits, time off, fitness program, all of these different things. So it's really important that you survey your employees and tailor your program so they really understand what that is. And you can put together the best package that meets what their needs are. Next up. Money is important. It's the dollar figure that's on the page, but we know that a lot of other areas, benefits, culture, can really help make that difference. Perfect. So, and Jill, I would love to get your take on this after I kind of walk everyone through this, because I think this goes to kind of where you started us today. So when we think about total rewards, we know there are a lot of different pieces. And again, it's different for all of us, right, on what we're looking for. This model called the Total Rewards Halo is what we use in our consulting work to really kind of think about this in concept. So the gray circle on the outside, there are two different things. Our external market factors, so those are generally things we can't control. Unemployment rate, the economy, those regulations around pay transparency or Secure Act 2.0, or any of those things that we can't control. Our organization factors are things we hopefully have some control over on our organization's mission, vision, culture, our objectives, what we're trying to achieve. All of those are influencing those colorful pie pieces around the middle. So you see, it's kind of a broad definition of total rewards. Of course, we have compensation and benefits and well-being at the top. Those are typically the cornerstone. But even things like our leaders, our managers, learning and development, that was mentioned quite a bit in the comments, our culture with inclusion and belonging, work environment. I still hear a lot about remote work, hybrid work, flexible schedules, all of those things. Of course, community impact. And then that middle around communication, because we can have the best programs in the world, but if we don't communicate them well, people won't value or fully understand them. I guess with this, and then I'll pause for you, Jill, to add in your thoughts. This is it looks equally spaced in each of these areas, but in reality, your company, your organization are making strategic decisions about your investments in terms of time and financial resources and where you want to invest. Maybe you have a really rich retirement plan, and that's really critical to your organization, but you maybe focus a little bit less on learning and development or things like that. So what that might be for your organization, and then how that maps with what your people are looking for. All right, Jill, I'll pause for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Megan, just in what I've learned from what you presented. So I'm just going to ask this. So you talked so much about transparency and philosophy, and transparency is new because anytime I've been looking for a job, because I've been at the same company for 14 years, there wasn't ranges, so my question is, and maybe you know this through surveys, do new hires tend to have a higher appreciation for benefits because they have a better understanding of when they were onboarded and when they selected the job, what the pay range was?
Yes, I think that's interesting. I don't have a formal data point around that, but that makes a lot of sense. And I think is true because they know what the pay range is, they know what the benefits are. And they likely, as they just went through that process of interviewing and selecting, they chose something that best fits where they're at their point in time. Because this changes. I'm curious, Jill, if you have a perspective on this too. But, when I was younger in my career, like learning and development and leadership it's still important, but was like most critical because I was learning and I didn't know as much what I was doing. Benefits kind of took a little bit of a back seat because I was, younger and new and wasn't using them as much. And now that's changed a little bit in my life as you get older, closer to retirement, maybe not as as perfect health. So it's interesting.
True story. My first job, 22, he offered me a little, I said, I'll need to earn 24,000 a year. Okay. Yeah. And he goes, well, we'll pay you 26 with medical. And I go, well, I'm not going to need medical.
Yeah.
This girl don't need medical. But the reality is, he's like, you're getting medical. This is a real company. And, but it is interesting because I think yes, I do agree that mentorship and of course the way he responded, like, don't be dumb. That's just the way we were raised, but it's interesting too, because with retirement, since so many participants are auto-enrolled, Megan, that when we look at tenure, the highest utilization is in new hires. That doesn't necessarily mean they're 22. You could be a new hire at a company at 22, 42, 52, 80, whatever. But we've done a really good job of onboarding the newest employees. And it sounds like you're doing the same with compensation because the law requires this transparency. Maybe they've just onboarded and seen, the list of all benefits that are available to them.
Yeah.
So they just need to survey because they really want to take care of their senior leaders, long tenured employees that are in that sweet spot where maybe they haven't come back and asked for a raise. Like, Megan, that happens where maybe there's people who have been there a while and they're happy to be working from home, but maybe it's time for them, to understand if it's time for a raise. And maybe a survey would be helpful for these employers. Is that what you're like, you try and ferret out like that?
Yeah, just trying to understand kind of how the sentiment has changed, how the workforce has changed, what new things are out there that maybe weren't, prevalent the last time that you really looked at all of these plans. And then think we're at time, but put any questions in the chat. But the other thing I feel like, Jill, is there's such a close connection between compensation and retirement from a timing perspective. I know when you look at kind of auto escalate and things, trying to like match that with when compensation increases happen, financial wellness programs, bringing that all together. So thinking about how your programs interact and support each other, I think is important too.
I agree. They really work together, and philosophically, you hear it so much, especially with my clients, and I know your clients too, where they're like, well, we end up having a more generous match because maybe we pay a little less, or we pay more so we don't have a match. And then there's everything in between.
Absolutely. All right. I want to get to the boot camp because you mentioned that.
Boot camp is
So
wonderful.
I think, Karina, do we have a slide on that? Thank you. So Jill mentioned this. So I do not have enough time today to walk through. I'll kind of say the building blocks of compensation and how you can put your program together. So my team and I offer we call it the compensation boot camp. No burpees required. It's just a bunch of compensation knowledge. It's virtual, 1 hour a week for 9 weeks. We'll be starting it in the spring. We do typically charge an investment of $2,500 for this class. It is SHRM certified, but because you're spending your time with us here in November at this event, we are going to offer it all to you as a follow-on learning opportunity. So you will get more information from the RPU team if you're interested in joining us for this in January.
I was going to say, go ahead and fill out the evaluation form and indicate your interest in compensation bootcamp, and we can easily set it up that way for you as well. So I'll go ahead and leave that there for now. Great job, Megan, as usual. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thank you, Megan. It was excellent. And the boot camp was excellent. Thank you. Wow, we have a break now? Breakdance? Breakdance. We have a 10-minute break. So, Nick, we want people back in 10 minutes. So are we willing to just do 10:22, or do you want them back at 10? Time frame on the 20?
10 minutes is fine.
10 minutes. Okay. So
10:22. I'll start a 10-minute timer, and then in the 2-minute warning, I have a 2-minute video that will play with a countdown.
Ooh,
so I'm very excited about my new video I made.
Thank you, Nick. That's been great.
No
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
10 minutes. We'll be back.
10 minutes. Welcome back from break. My gosh, Nick, those numbers counting down were the closest thing to boot camp I know. That is a very interesting countdown.
That countdown did not quite go as I planned. It didn't have music. I was
that
like, that's
reminds me of boot camp countdown when they linger on numbers for too long. So
love it. That was pretty funny. testing new stuff out. That was an epic failure, but that's okay.
No, I love it. It was not at all. I loved it. So thank you so much. Our next presenter is Amanda. And I just want to link this together. This morning, you've already learned about plan documents and what was so important, compensation. And then we learned about compensation. So if you haven't figured it out, when we're thinking about our future, our paycheck and compensation makes a big difference. So Amanda is here and she gets to teach you what we need to know in 30 minutes. As you know, those that attend this RPU are learning about fiduciary important topics, and there is no more important thing for a fiduciary to learn than how to be your own best participant in a retirement plan or in this wealth management world. And Amanda's here. Not only are you going to notice on the slide before her bio that she has a CFP, which is a very difficult designation. Different between a designation and a certificate. Designation, she gets to hang that behind her name, and it is absolutely hard to earn and well earned. She also has a German Shepherd. She has two. I didn't know this till I read this, but because I have one named Ray. So I have big dogs too, Amanda. And this is such an important topic. So Amanda is going to tell you what you really need to know in 30 minutes. I've seen her slide deck. I'm going to let her get started because she's going to have to talk as fast as I am right now to get through all her slides. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Amanda. I'm taking notes, so I might ask questions at the end. So thank you so much for being here today.
Great. Good morning, everyone. As Jill said, it is a lot to cover in 30 minutes, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. Will you go forward 2 slides? There we go. So first of all, what is wealth management? There's a misconception out there that wealth management is just about investments, but it really is a comprehensive, personalized approach to helping individuals and families grow, protect, and transfer their wealth. It goes beyond just the aspect of investing, but coordinating all aspects of a financial life to support long-term goals, security, and legacy. There are 5 major components, if you want to go to the next slide, to wealth management. So financial planning, which is really a holistic goals-based planning that involves, cash flow, retirement, education, insurance. It's important to have a coordinated plan that evolves with your various life stages. Investments, that is, making sure or building and managing an investment portfolio that aligns with your goals, your risk tolerance, time horizon, risk capacity. This might include things like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, private equity or private debt, real estate. It's important to have a resource to help you understand the economy, market volatility, and the value of a long-term disciplined approach so that you're not making emotional decisions. Income tax planning, while we are not tax professionals, we do help coordinate strategies with your tax professional and implementing or coordinating investments and planning strategies to minimize your taxes over time. Things like managing capital gains, asset location, growth versus income generation, things like Roth conversions, transfer of appreciated stock, charitable giving, business exit planning, etc. Estate and legacy planning. This is helping structure your assets and wishes to pass your wealth efficiently and purposefully to future generations or charitable causes. So making sure that we have the appropriate documents in place to facilitate those transfers when it's necessary. And then risk management, just working with industry experts to address your risk, both on a family, personal level and professional level. And making sure the appropriate insurances are in place to, again, protect the wealth that you've generated and minimize your risk exposure. Next slide. So we're going to dive into each of these concepts or these components in a little more detail. So first, financial planning. This is going to encompass most often when people think financial planning, they're thinking retirement planning. However, there's a lot of elements that go into that: cash flow, income replacement, education funding if you have children or grandchildren that you're looking to help fund, secondary education, planning around life events, marriage, divorce, death, inheritance, things like that, Social Security optimization, and healthcare is becoming an increasing component to financial planning. Next slide. I only see myself. Next slide. Okay, there we go. Okay, so what goes into retirement planning? So planning for retirement can be incredibly overwhelming, and there are factors that are completely out of our control, like the markets, and we cannot time the market. We don't know how the market is going to react on any given point of news. Regulatory reform, so regarding taxation, government benefits, savings, those kinds of things we are completely out of our control. There are some factors which we have some control over. So longevity, are we living an active, healthy lifestyle? There's obviously a factor of genetics that play into our longevity. Employment, both our employment earnings and the duration of our employment. Are we forced to retire early because of a disability or illness? And then the things that are totally in our control are the best way to achieve a secure retirement. And that is, maximizing our savings, managing our spending, efficiently utilizing tax-advantaged accounts, and being well diversified in our investment strategies, not only on the investment side, but also on the tax location side. Next slide. So when we think about the things that we can control, so managing our spending. So we hit peak spending at about ages 45 to 49, and then we see a decline from there. There's about a 30% reduction in our spending from those peak spending years to about age 80. The only two categories in which we see increases generally in spending in retirement are in healthcare and in charitable giving. This will come into play when we think about income replacement in retirement and what we need to save in accumulation years in order to set ourselves up for income replacement in retirement. So if we go to the next slide. So income replacement depends on household, and it's going to vary based on income level, different pre-retirement savings, spending behaviors, income tax. But generally, this chart is just showing us what amount of income we might need to replace in retirement based on our pre-retirement income. So if we kind of look at the middle of the chart here, someone who has pre-retirement income of about $100,000 will need to replace about 76% of that income in retirement. And that reduction comes from what I just showed you on the last slide, changes in expenditures. As we age, we tend to spend less. We're no longer saving into pre-retirement vehicles. And then our tax structure generally changes because we don't have the amount of earned income that we are then paying income tax on. Now that 76% that we need to replace in income is going to come from a couple different sources. Social Security being one of those benefits accounts for about 33% of that. And then the remaining amount needs to come from private or individual or employer funding. So that can be income sources like 401ks or pensions or annuities, cash value life insurance, taxable savings, HSAs. All of those are those private or employer sponsored elements that go into the amount that we'll need to fund our retirement picture. So next slide. And when we look at long-term retirement savings, there is kind of prioritization hierarchy, if you will, to making sure that we are maximizing our savings as well as considering tax implications. So first and foremost, we want to start with a strong foundation, an emergency fund. I recommend that people have 3 to 6 months of non-discretionary spending in an emergency fund to account for anything like an income shock if someone in the household loses their job or has a large income reduction, or just for everyday occurrences like the hot water heater breaks. We have something in order to fund those types of expenses. Then we want to move on to making sure that we are maximizing the employer match or taking advantage of that free money, if you will. So if you have a 401k plan that, has a 3% match, 50% of the first 6%, we want to make sure that you are saving a minimum of that 6% into the defined contribution plan next, so that you can get that 3% of free money. Then to the extent that there are high interest loans, we want to get those taken care of. And then we're moving on to things like an HSA. If you have the ability to save into an HSA because you have a high deductible insurance plan, an HSA is the only triple tax deferred investment vehicle that we have available to us. So contributions are made after or pre-tax, pre-tax, your growth on those accounts, an HSA account, which can be invested, grows tax deferred. And as long as withdrawals are taken out for qualified medical expenses, they also come out tax free. So it's an amazing vehicle that if you have access to it, I highly recommend that is utilized to its full extent. And then we move on to, again, maximizing to our contribution limits on defined contributions, then IRAs, and lastly in this hierarchy of prioritizing our savings is taxable investment accounts like a brokerage account that you may have individually or with your spouse. On to the next slide. So looking at that income replacement map, there is a chunk of that comes from Social Security. And so we want to talk about in financial planning, how do we optimize Social Security and so that we can capture the greatest benefit for our personal situation. So the youngest age that you can take Social Security is age 62. You do receive a reduction in your benefit. Generally, most people now are age 67, full retirement age, where they get their full Social Security benefit. But you do have the ability to have an incremental increase in your Social Security benefit if you delay to age 70. You get an 8% per year increase in your benefit, which is credited on a monthly basis. So it isn't an all or nothing. You don't have to decide at age 67 or wait until 70. But you do get an increase in your benefit for every month that you delay beyond your full retirement age. The key here is that you have portfolio assets that you can withdraw on during those years between full retirement age to age 70 in order to maximize your Social Security benefit. This chart here is showing us what the cumulative benefit for someone who decides, most importantly, from full retirement age to age 70 to delay their Social Security. So if you started at full retirement age, you would have a cumulative benefit by age 90 of about 1.39 million. If you delayed to age 70, you would have a cumulative lifetime benefit of about 1.56 million. So a significant difference. And the break even between from an age perspective of where your cumulative benefit is greater by delaying your Social Security to age 70 is about age 81 and a half, about age 80, 81. And so if you are healthy, live a active lifestyle, think that you're going to live beyond age 81, it will benefit you from an income replacement perspective to delay to age 70 if, again, you have other income sources to withdraw on to allow your Social Security to grow. Next slide. So healthcare. This is a growing concern for many people as healthcare continues to get more and more expensive. It generally has an inflation rate greater than other areas of our spending. This chart is just illustrating someone who is 65 today, where their likely Medicare premiums will be by age 90. It's almost a 3 times greater expense today from today to age 90. We estimate that that someone 65, a couple 65 today, retiring, will likely need about $260,000 for healthcare expenses in retirement. A 55-year-old couple retiring in 10 years will need approximately $465,000, and a 45-year-old couple retiring in 20 years will need about $590,000 just for healthcare expenses in retirement. So it is becoming more and more important to do financial planning around healthcare expenses in retirement. And again, if you go to the next slide, an HSA is, an amazing vehicle to help combat the healthcare expense challenges that we are going to face. Again, triple tax deferred vehicle, and it is you get the benefit of tax compounding. What I can't stress enough here is that an HSA is a savings account, not a spending account. So during your accumulation or income earning years, it is important to fund deductibles, co-insurance, those types of things through cash flow rather than taking it out of your HSA. You save the money into your HSA, you let that grow as much as possible so that it is there in your retirement years when you're living on more of a fixed income. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to move on to investment management, the second component of wealth management. So this is understanding, first of all, the role that investments play in our retirement success and our wealth generation and accumulation, asset allocation and diversification, investment due diligence process, and asset location. Next slide. So understanding the risk of investing and the power of compounding. So this slide here is just showing us going back to 1995, looking at 4 major asset classes. So large cap stocks, small cap stocks, corporate bonds, and cash. What would happen to $10,000 adjusted for inflation? So as you can see here, there is a wide spread between what a portfolio would look like if it was invested solely in cash versus in a portfolio that was in large or small cap stocks. It is imperative that we understand, in order to meet our retirement and wealth goals, we need to have some risk exposure, so equity exposure of our investments to allow for compounding. Because this is adjusted for inflation, you can see that you actually lose money by being invested in cash over that time period because of the effects that inflation has to the buying power of our money. So again, it's important to understand that there is volatility, as you can see, between the highs and lows here on these charts of equities, but over the long term, you benefit from having that equity exposure. So it plays a critical role in our investment strategy. Next slide. And while you can have large disparities on any given year, on a 1-year basis, as you can see here on equities, the blue bar, on a 1-year period, you can be down as much as 37% and as high as 52%. But if you have a longer time horizon, you're a consistent investor, you have a disciplined approach, if you let your funds grow over a 20-year period, that narrows significantly. You're now, positive 6, positive, 18% in equity. So you can see over the longer time horizon, those spread. Can you hear me? Those spread ranges narrow, and we have, again, looking at the various investment vehicles, we have a simple, balanced portfolio. You have moderated returns over the long term. Okay, when we look at asset class returns, so this graphic right here, we call it the quilt. So I'm sure everyone's heard the phrase, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Same thing holds true in the investment universe. We would never say invest solely in the S&P 500 or invest solely in real estate. We want to make sure that we are in diversified portfolios, because on any given year, you could be you can be at the highest returning asset class for the period, or you could be at the bottom of the barrel. If you look here, commodities, it's the dark green. You can see that sometimes it is higher in the return category, and then it is often on the bottom as well. It's a very volatile asset class. The white boxes going kind of through the middle with the line, that is a balanced asset allocated portfolio. So you can see you're never going to be the highest returning, you're never going to be the lowest returning, you're going to be right in the middle. And that is how diversification plays into our investment strategy, making sure we have consistent returns over the long term and minimizing volatility. Next slide. And with that, it is important to understand that we need to stay invested and have a disciplined approach. This graphic is just illustrating, what happens when you try to time the market. So during periods of extreme market decline, it is a natural emotional reaction for people to want to take control of their wealth and sell out of the market and go to cash to seek, safety. This not only locks in losses, but then it often results in missed gains because you don't know when to get back in. And this is really grounded in the psychology that losses hurt more than gains feel good. But as the data is showing us, 7 of the 10 best days occurred within 2 weeks of the 10 worst days. So again, you can get out of the market, but likely your timing to get back in is not going to be advantageous. This is showing us here someone who was fully invested going back to 2005. If you stayed invested, did not try to time the market, get in and out, you would have had an annualized rate of return of about 10.4%. Missing just the 10 best days drops that return from 10.4 to 6.1. And missing 30 of the best days, you drop that return drastically to 1.3%. So again, we want to just emphasize how important it is to have a long-term strategy, disciplined approach. And this is where an advisor can really help you make sure that you are not making emotional decisions with your investments. Next slide. This is just the benefits of saving early and often. This is just showing us 4 different types of savers and investors. It is clear that someone who starts early, who is a consistent saver and is invested in the market, has better long-term outcomes than other types of investors or savers. So again, can't stress enough the power of long-term compounding with your money. By starting early and consistent, you are going to position yourself to be much more equipped for a successful retirement than other strategies. Next slide. Okay, moving on to the third component. So income tax planning. Again, I'm not a tax professional, but I do work with clients on tax strategy related to their investments and planning. Those include tax diversification, managing gains and losses in a portfolio, Roth IRA contributions or conversions, Medicare tax brackets, and how income may affect your government programs. Next slide. Next slide. So just like we want diversification in our investments, we also want diversification in our investment strategies. So there are we call it the 4-legged tax stool. So first is your pre-tax money. So your pre-tax 401k, traditional IRA, money goes in at a pre-tax rate. It grows tax deferred, but your withdrawals are taxed as ordinary income. Conversely, Roth IRA or Roth 401k, those contributions are after tax. They still grow tax deferred, but you have your withdrawals in retirement are tax free. You can also make after-tax contributions to your 401k or traditional IRA. The only benefit there is that they do grow tax deferred. And on the withdrawal, only in the investment gain is taxed because you were taxed on the front end of the contribution. So it's a little bit of a hybrid withdrawal strategy, but not as tax advantageous as your pre-tax or your Roth. Again, HSA. Nope, go back. Again, HSA, only triple tax deferred vehicle. And then lastly, your taxable savings contributions are after tax. Your investment growth, you are being taxed on an annual basis for dividends, income, and any realized capital gains. But on the withdrawals, it's a little bit of a hybrid because it depends on how you take withdrawals. If you have to sell something in order to generate cash for a withdrawal, then you are going to be taxed on the capital gain, whether that's short or long-term capital gain. So it is the least tax advantageous strategy of the four-legged tax stool, but it is still very important. Next slide. So when we think about these four different types of tax investment vehicles from a tax perspective, it's important to understand how they play into, how the withdrawals play into the calculation of what is going to be or what percentage of our Social Security is going to be taxed, and what will be added to our AGI for medical or Medicare surcharges. So HSA and Roth vehicles, they provide tax-free funding, which do not result in a reduction of your government benefits, but withdrawals from a 401k on pre-tax contributions, it increases your AGI. So it will play into your Social Security taxation and potential Medicare surcharges. Same thing with taxable investment vehicles. Your dividends, your interest, and your capital gains also can increase that AGI, which will again play into your Social Security and Medicare benefit taxation. This is why it is so important that we have the kind of four components of tax investing so that we have complete flexibility in retirement to pick and choose which vehicles we're withdrawing from to minimize what that tax implication may be. Next slide. In the essence of time, I won't spend too much time on this, but Roth conversions. Here's just a example of what we should be thinking about if we are considering a Roth conversion. So is your tax rate going to be higher in retirement than it is now? Then maybe you want to do a Roth conversion. Is your time horizon longer? That may be another indication of why you want to do a Roth conversion. There is an important component here that from a tax perspective that I want to mention is Roth conversions do increase your adjusted gross income, which will or can potentially increase the taxation of your Social Security and affect your Medicare surcharge. So again, other considerations, but Roth conversions can be great vehicles to create that tax diversification if you didn't have it prior. Next slide. And then lastly, I have to mention the power of tax deferred compounding. We've talked a lot about retirement vehicles and their tax deferred status, Roth and traditional. It's just very important to understand that what this power of not having to pay tax on an annual basis on dividends, income, and capital gains can do for us. It results in this example of someone with a 30-year time horizon in about a 0.9, so almost a 1% greater annual rate of return because of the tax deferred nature of that vehicle. So again, a powerful wealth creation tool here. And it can, again, going back to that prioritization, again, maximizing our contributions to our retirement plans. Next slide. So estate and legacy planning. So this is, what are the tools that to transfer our wealth and ensure that our families are protected as well. So wills, powers of attorney or POA, medical power of attorney, beneficiary designations, revocable or irrevocable trusts, and charitable giving all play into our estate and legacy plan. Next slide. So some of the tools that we want to think about when managing our estate or transfer are and who needs them. So powers of attorney, all adults need powers of attorney. This is going to make sure that your financial and legal affairs can be managed if you become incapacitated or ill. And your next is your beneficiary designation. So if you have retirement accounts, most of us do, right? So beneficiaries tied to your retirement accounts to make sure that, first of all, it gives you control where you want it to go. It can preserve the tax deferred status of that vehicle, at least for a period of time, and it avoids probate. And so any transfer by contract, which is the beneficiary designation, avoids probate. Transfer on death or payable on death, this is just like a beneficiary designation, but for taxable accounts or bank accounts. Again, it gives you control over where those assets go, and it avoids probate. A will, so anyone who has, an adult who has property or young children will want a will. It gives you control over where your property goes, but then also, more importantly, it appoints the guardian for your young children. Trusts are specific situation. It is more private than a will. Trusts avoid probate. It can be used for tax planning or more complex planning and goals, or can provide for special needs relatives that we want to make sure that their government benefits stay intact in a transfer of wealth. Next slide. I promise I'm almost done, Jill.
No, Amanda, we may end after this one because this is so important. So let's wrap this one up.
Okay.
And, thank you.
Okay, great. Just the last one here on just managing your affairs. Just again, healthcare, power of attorney, and proxy. All adults should have these things. It is going to make sure that medical decisions are being made by whom you want those medical decisions to be made by. In the event of incapacitation, and it states what your wishes are. If you want to, have prolonged life through artificial means. So again, those are very important documents to have in place. And then a HIPAA release. All adults should have a HIPAA release because it allows your family to communicate with medical practitioners at any time. If you have surgery or something like that, just to make sure that your medical team and your family are all in sync. Okay,
Thank you, Amanda. You can't learn everything in a half hour. You just can't.
I know.
You can't. But that's what gives you job security, Amanda, because this is a life in learning. You have to spend the rest of our life learning how to be better at managing money. And it all starts with our first paycheck, our first compensation, making sure that we do the right things right, which is to save 10%, diversify as you taught us. And then as we get wiser and wiser and wealthier, we start to make really good decisions. And I have to say, Amanda, I can see it 100 times, but how you explained Social Security was crystal clear to me what time it is, what age is best. So thank you for explaining that slide to me finally. Slide 78 when you get the replay. And then HSAs. Now, you didn't give any tips on how to keep spouses outside of people's HSAs. So I guess that would be in lesson 2.0 to hide the card. Yeah. And it's okay, Nick, you can bring Colin on. But thank you, Amanda. We have plenty to learn, and thank you so much for all your information. Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bonjour.
Oh my gosh. Bonjour, Colin. How are you?
Doing well. You're doing great, Jill. I'm a fan.
Yes, this is so exciting. I get to spend 30 minutes with Colin West, who is a senior vice president at Fidelity. More importantly, someone I've known for many, many years. And, you know, I have to say there are some people that if you were fortunate enough to sit next to at a conference or at a park bench, Colin would be one of those where we would find so much to chat about. So
That's
today
very sweet of
is
you, Bill.
today is a day.
Likewise.
Yes,
Thank you
Colin.
for having me. Honored to be here. Tip of the cap to our plan sponsors for fulfilling their fiduciary duties and learning. I've been a part of a number of retirement universities. This is thrilling for me to be doing a little conversation here with you, Jill. So I'm honored, and also kudos to our sponsors for tuning in. And we'll try to catch us back up on track too in terms of timing.
Yes. That's going to be hard to do because we like to talk. So this is so interesting. So we came up with this idea. See what we did with the K, 401k, wild K ideas, what plan sponsors should really be thinking about. Or you could also say, what should plan sponsors really be thinking about? Where did Colin go? Why did he disappear? Anyway, he'll be back. There he is.
And like that, I'm back.
Oh my God, you scared me for a minute. So next slide, Karina, is really the pièce de résistance, which is this what plan sponsors should really be thinking about? And so Colin, you helped choose these 4 topics. You lead us off with this. And then I told Karina we're going to remove this slide once we go through a couple of these, and then we'll focus on you and I until we get into the mega Roth discussion.
For better or for worse.
Yes, for better or for worse. Yes. Will we or won't we?
Well, great. Thanks, everybody. Again, Jill and I, tongue in cheek, put wild K ideas together, but these are the hottest topics that we're seeing out in the retirement plan space. And we thought we'd start with private equity because President Trump signed an executive order that sort of paved the way to what we call alternatives in retirement plans. And what are alternatives? It's a massively growing area. It's private equity, it's hedge funds, it's venture capital, private credit you may have heard a lot about, and private debt. There's a lot of talk there, direct real estate. And there's just been a greater focus here because it's grown 5-fold just in the past decade. So we call them alts. Private equity is getting all the attention right now because very few companies now have that desire to go public to get funding in an IPO because they can just stay private. Case in point, Fidelity is a really large privately held company, my employer, and there's a lot of regulatory effort that has to be put forth anytime you're a publicly traded company. You have to be focused on quarterly earnings, pleasing shareholders. So there's a massive opportunity from an investor standpoint, your plan participants, to invest in these sort of alts or especially private equity. So the latest executive order basically said that you can have alternatives in retirement plans. And combine that right now, Jill, with the stock market's been on an absolute tear.
Yeah.
And the NVIDIA right now, just to pick a favorite stock that everyone talks about, that's worth 8% of the S&P. And the gains have been really good. And I think there's some general uneasiness out there where people are maybe a little concerned about, are we overextended? This is all demand driven. And, we talk so much about the Mag 7. It's been working really well. People want diversification though. And there's challenges around private equity specifically. It's liquidity. You generally have to be a accredited investor to invest outside of your retirement plan. There's transparency concerns. What am I really owning? Who's auditing these companies? There's risk management. But sponsors are, depending on which survey you read, Jill, I'm sure you've seen, we have our own survey at Fidelity, but it's anywhere from 20 to 40% of folks in your shoes as plan sponsors are interested in at least learning about alts. And the vast majority would consider paying higher management fees to get potential higher returns. And I'll just ask you a question, Jill. How would you describe the media coverage on this topic? Has it been favorable? Has it been more negative? What have you seen?
Well, I think the media coverage has been positive, almost, Colin, as if there's no additional risk and how easy. But I think ultimately, as a fiduciary, they have to understand what they're getting into if they make this available to their participants. They have the same level of fiduciary, I guess, scrutiny or prudence for adding an investment like this. I also think that executive order, and it's on the last slide, so I did attach the executive order as an attachment. So I think that was a little confusing too, because it almost looked like you had to add it. So that was a hold the boat. You don't have to do anything within a retirement plan.
Yeah.
But tell me how. I'm open-minded. I'm a open-minded participant, plan advisor, and plan sponsor. How would I add private equity to my 401k plan and do no harm?
I just want to use all the French analogies. You would say that you have a laissez-faire approach to.
Yes. Maybe it's a la carte, or maybe it's in a fixed menu.
Yep. Yeah. So the concern, and there has been some negative media attention. There's been some glowing praise about it because of obviously the investor opportunity. There's also the fact that the asset managers see this as a huge opportunity because our retirement plan space is $13 trillion. So a lot of big financial services companies are kind of excited about using their private equity offering to get into the DC market. There's been a lot of partnerships announced, and the executive order
is my least interested part, Colin. I don't want to help private equity.
That's right.
I want to help participants. So
100%.
yes, we have to be careful with, no, not you. We as a collective industry have to be careful not to favor private equity, but to understand private equity, maybe.
And that's why, to your point, it will be a sleeve within a target date fund, for example. And quite candidly, your participants might already be investing in private equity and not know it. So large cap growth fund, Fidelity Contra Fund already owns some private assets that you can't buy out in the market. So there's been a lot of news about it because I think people are concerned. They're sort of likening it to cryptocurrencies. And it did say you can have digital assets in the executive order when you read it. But these are going to be small pieces of various investments that are basically put inside a sleeve that are, screened, appropriate for participants. Liquid is a big concern, right? Liquidity, being able to be benefit responsive and take funds out. And this is something that isn't necessarily something that everyone's going to have to adopt either. It's just an option. But what we're seeing is that, participants are interested in it from an investment standpoint. Sponsors are interested in adding it. 7% of sponsors did add some sort of alternative just in the past year based on our annual plan sponsor survey. So, and then there's a lot more interested prospectively, 20%. So the light hysteria, can I read you a couple of headlines, Jill?
Yeah.
There's a Wall Street Journal headline, Trump's 401k order offers retirement savers crypto, private assets, but also higher fees and more risk. Private equity and crypto could be headed for your 401k. Here's what you need to know. NPR. How soon will crypto creep into your 401k? They have alliteration there. New rules being explored. So private equity's hunting for a quicker path. So part of why Jill and I love this idea of like wild K plan ideas, like don't fear them all, right? This is a great opportunity for participants. And like all things, we need to provide education, right, Jill?
That is absolutely right. Education to the participants and to the fiduciaries. And you're right, need not be afraid of a little diversification. Need not to be afraid of something we can learn to understand, right? I have 2 clients that went from publicly traded to private. So, we'll just get comfortable with the idea of there's different types of companies to invest in.
100%.
Wow, we're on the same page. This is why Colin and I work so well together.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. Are we ready for the next one? I think the next one, please listen up, everyone. If you're a participant or a plan sponsor, fiduciary, when will we take cybersecurity seriously?
So part of why I'm in a windowless conference room, I'm in our office in Westlake, Texas, while you're in beautiful Paris. And I actually met with our cybersecurity team today. So Fidelity employs over 1,000 cyber experts. And have you been here before, Jill? Have you
I
taken a
have.
tour? You have.
I think
Awesome.
they caught me checking my balance one morning at 3 a.m. and brought me in. So,
Well,
it's very impressive.
I'll start with a story. I just learned this past week, but we had an 84-year-old retiree who had never set up a digital account. And you and I have talked about this before, that if you don't have any sort of account set up digitally, that's when you're most at risk. But this person was taking periodic distributions twice a year, and unbeknownst to her, she was part of this, I'll say it, Comcast Xfinity hack, where tens of millions of people had their credentials stolen in a breach. And essentially, she noticed that there was a bank account all of a sudden attached to her retirement plan, and then later missing $160,000. And from the criminals' perspective, they had gotten access to 36 million customer records of a cable provider, looked through people's emails, phones that were all compromised, and in this case saw an email from Fidelity and said, oh, they probably have a Fidelity account. A lot of people use the exact same username and password across accounts, but this person was actually able to set up the account as if it were them. And they registered online, logged in, one-time passcode, got the verification through Comcast, added a new bank, right? There's a 3-day hold. All of our HR professionals on the call know about the hold. And then the 7 days later, funds were transferred out. The good news is we have a customer protection guarantee. So we gave this person their 160 grand back through no fault of their own. They hadn't set up an account. But that's what's happening, is the more breaches there are out there in the world.
Yes.
And if people aren't monitoring their accounts, or they've not set something up, or they don't have multi-factor authentication,
Yes.
you have things like this. And it's there's a lot of attackers out there, right? There's criminals, hacktivists, people trying to drag a company's name through the mud, maybe with a social media cause, take over somebody's X account. You have nation states that have unlimited time and money. We often talk about Russia and North Korea and China and Iran. And, our cyber folks relayed that a lot of the North Korean hackers are actually operating out of China, and sometimes the exact same building as the Chinese hackers. But they all have unlimited time and money and limited kind of prosecution, depending on the country they're in. And they have a lot of different ways to attack. And sometimes you just have corporate insiders that either don't know someone took over their account, or they're deliberately testing the firewalls. But the scale is absolutely massive. And I think that's why we wanted to talk about this,
Yes.
Jill. Some of these firms they're like professional organizations where they have HR recruiting staffs, and they have PTO and call centers, and they just are constantly trying to find ways in to get why are retirement assets so attractive, because there's so much of it here, and a lot of people haven't really set up a presence, and they don't monitor their accounts that frequently. So
It's so important. If you're taking notes and listening to what Colin is saying, you have to log in to your account. You have to set up your password, dual authentication. It doesn't really matter if it's annoying anymore. It's essential. It's essential because you need to know that participant that you shared, I think it was a she knew her money had disappeared, maybe by the next month. But I mean, you can imagine that there are people, if they've never checked in on their account and kind of proudly have no desire to use technology, it could be years before they realize that something is missing. So one of the tips that I use with our clients is there's another thing, people don't assign beneficiaries. So Colin, I tell our clients, remind participants to log in to update or assign a beneficiary, because that's their family. Oh, by the way, in order to do that, they have to log in, set up their password, do all that. So it's going to get to a time where I'm like, be serious about cybersecurity and assign a beneficiary. But right now I'm like, assign a beneficiary. Oh, and by the way, that's prudent for cybersecurity. But I think it's going to get so important, it will lead the discussion.
Jill, you know I'm a nerd, so I love stats. But Forbes puts out a report every year on cybersecurity, and they say it's a 10.5 trillion with a T problem in terms of global money stolen or legal action or settlements or ransoms paid or lack of productivity. But that is a massive number. It's like 10% of our global GDP, I think. So for us to have that kind of focus, we got to be taking it seriously now. And, we scan the dark web to make sure that participants, data isn't out there, and we'll proactively block accounts. And we're just blocking more and more accounts as there's more and more data out there and people aren't changing their passwords. You brought up a great point too. Just by going online and having a digital presence, people are more likely to even be engaged in the retirement plan, let alone know if somebody had money stolen. In the case of the retiree I was talking about, it was 5 months later she realized it.
5 months. That's a long time though. It's a lot of
pretty
money.
wild. Pretty wild. The other thing, but before we pivot, can I just share, if anybody's interested, and a friend of Jill Shea, Fidelity does a cyber wellness audit where you can download an app, and you as the employer or your participants can go through and answer a series of questions, and it's free for anyone. We'll actually give you a score, like a retirement score, but it's a cyber wellness number. And then if you want your IT department, if you're concerned about this, we'll consult with you and have a conversation and basically give you actionable free consultation. And we've got folks that have worked at the NSA and CIA and Secret Service and so forth and so on. We've got 1,000 people that work for cyber just at Fidelity. So we're happy to talk to you about what the DOL does. Jill's got great kind of best practices there as well. So we can, if there's any.
Uh-oh. Well, he's telling you how important it is. There he is.
I'm just bobbing and weaving.
Yeah. So yes, and just to continue that, so not only engage on the top down with the with Colin's offer, but also be engaged with your own plan. When your advisor says the market was up 22%, check your account, make sure it's up 22%. That maybe that one time you realize, oh my gosh, I've been sitting in cash, or oh my gosh, what have I been doing this whole time? Or why did my employer's money not hit yet? These are the things that you should be looking at, both cybersecurity, but also just security. If you don't mind me adding that. And I have been to your cybersecurity room. It's very impressive at Fidelity, Colin, yes.
Jill, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
It's about your favorite topic.
France?
How much money can you save in a retirement plan?
Oh, that's a good transition. You can save pre-tax or in a Roth ERISA protection account, you can save $31,000. However, and this is good, Karina, if you could bring up slide 106, there is a manner in which a person could save additional money.
You can save more?
You can save more of your own money if your employer allows for an after-tax. So click one more time, Karina, and I'll fill in those blanks over there. You can save up to $70,000. Is this what you were asking, Colin?
Drum roll. Yeah, it's interesting. You and I are young and hip, and I started seeing a lot on LinkedIn from financial influencers, people that maybe had worked at like tech companies, for example, or folks that had just sort of figured this out. And people, we have I spend a lot of time on Reddit. We have a big presence there. People are sharing this gospel because more and more plans have been adopting a Roth, a mega backdoor Roth, the ability to convert, which we'll talk about, and then an after-tax bucket. And this is something that I think, there's a lot to be said for. A lot of people are just struggling and making really good good money, and you might have folks like this in your organization. If you're not aware of this, Jill, I'll defer to you to walk through kind of the taxation, but these are staggering sums that people are putting away and then converting. It's a huge tax benefit.
I do. And also on the last page, I do have this source that brought so much information to LinkedIn and Reddit and my clients, because there was a Wall Street Journal article that brought a lot of attention to after tax. And the most important thing is the bottom right-hand corner where it says after tax. Yeah, it's taxed at distribution, just the earnings. But what if the day it goes in your pay from your paycheck? So let's say Colin and I are young and hip. We're doing an additional $500 per paycheck into after tax. The minute it hits, you move it to Roth. So there is no taxable situation. It went in after tax. Yes, you would have had to pay tax on the earnings, but you're moving it right to Roth. So you're doing this every paycheck. There are a couple record keepers, Fidelity's one, where it's automatically done once you sign up for that. And then the next slide, page 107, really illustrates the importance of how these all work together. Because you, as Colin said, the pre-tax and Roth, you can do 31,000 if you're older than 50. But the after tax is something that you can do, and then you convert that. It's converted over to Roth 401k. And then, of course, I just gave an idea of a match, maybe an additional, $4,000. So the maximum an employee can benefit is that $70,000. It's a little bit more if you're older than age 50.
It's interesting because a lot of plans still, I'm surprised, don't have Roth. So 20% of sponsors added Roth in the last year based on our annual survey, and then 18% expect to add it in the coming year. And Secure Act, we've talked a lot about Roth, election for matching contributions. Just to get into the details here, in order for highly compensated employees to make after-tax contributions, there's got to be room in the ACP test, even if you're a safe harbor plan. So what we'll do for our clients is we'll actually provide an assessment, and it's 15 pages long last I looked at it, but it shows after-tax to Roth conversion analysis. And we'll basically look at a plan and say, this is how it could affect ACP testing if you have 5, 10, or 15% of your non-Hileys and your Hileys participate, and let's say they defer 10% or something. So it'll actually tell you how you're going to do on the ACP test, and then the plan doc has to be amended to allow for both the Roth bucket and then the Roth in-plan conversion. And then, Jill, to your point, the real magic is when you call the call center one time and say, I want to do this, and I'm going to put the money in now and immediately convert it to Roth, and it's after tax one day, and then it's Roth, which is, we all know, tax-free through to retirement. And from now on, when I put this after tax money in, it will automatically convert. So it's pretty amazing. And that's part of what I was sort of referencing.
Mm-hmm.
People like to learn from their peers. They trust their peers. They're always looking for cool financial strategies. And I think it's a big boon for a lot of employers that have these features when they're recruiting, to be able to say, look what you can do here. It's beyond just the matching that we might contribute. It's really the ability for you to save more. So, reduce tax liability is what it's all about. And, this money's going to grow, which is exciting.
The other thing about this benefit that I like, and adding Roth, if you haven't done that, is you're able to promote these to the participants as really a new benefit, a new feature to their paycheck, a new future for their future, a feature for their future, and there's no cost. So as a plan sponsor, you can add a little nuance to the 401k, really with no additional cost. It's no cost to the employer. It's no cost to the employee. And I know I'm a nerd to this too, Colin. They get to save more money.
And you just need a slide like this, right? Like, it's not as complicated as it might seem. Right?
It isn't complicated. And it also, just because it goes underutilized for a year or two, doesn't mean it wasn't a great idea to add it. When we first added Roth back in 2006, it was unusual. Yeah, it was very low utilization. It It does not mean it's not successful. It just means it's just going to take some time. Not everybody maxes out on their retirement plan, so this is a great way to just dip your toe into it.
And not to get macro and scary, Jill, but don't you feel like the more we talk about the national debt and the more we talk about taxes and tax rates expiring, I feel like there's a lot more participants that are interested in like, how do I make sure this money's not Roth? Yep.
Yes, because Colin, Fidelity and my employer, Wells Fargo, they're never like, hey, Jill, can we pay you tax-free this year? But what if when we're 65, we can pay ourselves tax-free?
Yep, 100%.
So
We're seeing the same thing with HSAs. People are really excited about putting their, $7,000 as a family, like putting that money away triple tax-free. It's the same interest, so just different bucket.
Well, what do you think? How can we personalize further? Slide 108, Karina. How do we personalize further, Colin?
It's interesting. It's the same paradox we were just talking about, Jill. So 401k plans work best when we keep everything simple, right? And we don't want to confuse employees and overcomplicate things. And we just want them to enroll, ideally auto-enroll. There's less decision-making. We default them. Otherwise, we drive them away or they decide not to go through the full enrollment process. But we have so much more data now, which is what you're alluding to. And we can customize or we can personalize. Or if it were, McDonald's, you can have it your way. It's the same idea. We can take a lot of data points and have people go into a managed account. And this is something that there's some negativity around this too. Sometimes the fees are a concern. There's generally an additional fee for a managed account. The complexity, the kind of what's in the black box, what is the glide path? But I'll tell you anecdotally, just to maybe take some of the fear away, if somebody calls Fidelity and says, I'd like to enroll in my 401k, 90% of those people end up in a target date fund after they have a conversation, right? I'm sure that's your experience when you sit with participants.
Yes, or auto-enrolled. Yeah, almost 100%, yes.
Defaulted in. So what managed accounts are, and this slide shows really nicely, our average managed account data point is actually 14 data points, but we know so much about participants and we can personalize and invest for them maybe in a better way than in a target date fund. Once we know what their spending needs are and what Social Security is going to yield for them and how much their savings rate is. And if, their account balance is above or below a certain amount, what their pay is, there's a lot of information that is driving people to have better outcomes. And I personally am in a managed account and I feel like I appreciate the diversification and there's a lot of proof points here, but when we study who's in a managed account versus who's in a target date fund, it tends to be the honor roll, super saver, folks that are really, wanting to do the right thing and do the best thing and not, try to get in and out of the market or do it themselves, but they want it custom. Is that your experience, Jill?
Yes. Colin, it's Burger King that lets you have it your way. Somebody just commented on that. I mean,
my fault.
Come on. Yes, I like personalization. I love this. This had headline news too, Colin, in our industry. It was like, are managed accounts just expensive target date funds? And I say no, because they would only be expensive target date funds if you didn't engage with the managed account provider. So you're absolutely right, Colin. If you're going to be a participant and have a managed account, then by all means meet every year, just like you're supposed to. Update when you want to retire, update your outside assets, update how much cash you have over there, because it may affect your equity allocation within your managed account. How much where you want to retire, I guess, affects your taxes. I'm in California, so I didn't know there was a choice. I thought it was just high taxes. But there's so much that you can personalize. You said 14, I think, different items. With a target date fund, it's the age you are, because target date funds are built on the date at which you retire. So good for you if you're defaulted into a target date fund or opt in on yourself. That's a well-diversified portfolio. But maybe you're on to your second or third job, or you've passed 100,000, after you've saved a couple years, and now you want to personalize it and make sure that it really meets your needs. These managed accounts are not scary. They're optional with, opt in within a retirement plan. And I think they are actually fantastic to have as an offering within a retirement plan.
100%. And maybe a final point here. What's in it for our plan sponsors? How is it really going to help them? What a participant invests in? And I was talking about sort of super savers or honor roll students, but you said the magic word, Jill, which is engaged. So people that are in managed accounts, by all measure, have greater engagement with a retirement plan. They have greater savings rates. They're generally saving 10 to 15% of pay versus others, for us here at 8%. They are 92% engaged, meaning that when we ping them every quarter and say, here's your asset allocation, here's what we changed, or they call us and talk to a managed account specialist, 92% are engaged versus others are 70% engaged on average. And then feeling financially secure. This is what helps worker productivity. If they're 90% feeling financially secure versus others are usually only about 50% financially secure, that leads to greater workplace productivity. And studies show people that are stressed, and we can track that based on their retirement score or surveying them, or if they took a hardship withdrawal. If they're stressed, they're less productive. And on average, they work 5 less hours per week because they're dealing with financial headaches. And, there's a global kind of macro number. Financially stressed employees and distracted workers cost employers $180 billion a year just in the US alone. So like, if people are saving, feeling good about their plan, they're and in something that they feel confident is good for them and custom for them and tailored for them, they're generally working, longer tenure, more productive. So it's something that the fees are coming down as well, and that is leading to a lot.
I like that. I like the fees coming down. Karina, finish on slide 109 for us, because this is kind of the world I live in, where I encourage my clients to be readers, and when they read something, to email me or bring it up at the committee. So I love when somebody this year says, what about that executive order? And I'm like, you're going to have to elaborate. But this is the executive order here. The link, when we send you the information, it's on the executive order for the alternative assets. There's a DOL tips here. And then I did add the 2 articles on Mega Roth, which caused so much questions from my clients in a good way. It was Peter Thiel who turned his Roth into a $5 billion account. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about just normal savers. So let's not get crazy. But both of those articles are very illustrative. So,
and final plug, if a cyber wellness audit is helpful for you or your participants, talk to Jill, and she can bring us in to help you with kind of your cyber consulting.
Yes. And this is for those that are saving already to hit their maximum or to get the match. You're absolutely right, LinkedIn user. If this is not for everyone, the Mega Roth is not for everyone, but managed accounts can be. Actually, managed accounts can really personalize for someone whose goals are different. To me, the cost is worth it if you're getting advice.
So of our wild K ideas, private equity alternatives, cybersecurity, Roth, after tax, managed accounts, they're not so wild, are they, Jill?
They're not wild. I thought you were going to make me pick a favorite. I couldn't pick one. So no, they're not wild. We got this.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me. Thanks everybody for your time and attention. And again, tip of the cap for fulfilling your fiduciary duties and learning today.
Merci beaucoup, Colin. Thank you so much.
Au revoir, Jill.
Au revoir. Thank you. Wow. That was so interesting to me. Hopefully to you too. We are bringing on for the last speaker, Kurt Snyder. I'm not sure of all the speakers. Let me see. I don't think I've met Kurt. Nice to meet you, Kurt. Kurt Snyder. But I love this topic. Okay, so I know we already had a comment about not everything's for the you said poor LinkedIn user. I say new savers or low savers, but let's let's be real. Everyone starts out somewhere when it comes to retirement planning. Everyone does. And the only way to get to where we want to get, which is to retirement, is to save a little bit each paycheck. I tell participants 10%. What Kurt's going to share with you today is the higher earners, 10% as it is not enough. They're making too much money for 10% to get them where they need to be. So Kurt's going to talk to you today about investing in the leadership, the high leaders of your organization, and securing their future. So welcome, Kurt. I'm Jill Shea. It's a pleasure to meet you. And you're ending today. So I'm so glad that you'll be ending today's meeting. And then I'll wrap it up right after you finish. So welcome.
Awesome. Nice to see you, Jill. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for everyone that's on this call for taking the time. We will move through this pretty quickly. I know we're taking things home, so hopefully we ended on a good note. We're going to talk about a couple of things, also including your comment around saving more. And look, is what I tell organizations: highly compensated executives and employees are highly compensated for a reason, right? So they're the leaders and the engines of the organization. So it's a pleasure to be here. I will say really quick before I launch into this, I heard two key words earlier. I heard German and I heard shepherd. So I know we don't have time to go into it. I have two of them running around the house as well. I have a 100-pound black German shepherd who's my service dog, and he should be sitting here next to me, but we'll have that conversation offline. So if you see the screen, there's sort of a large description, but I'm going to read it because I think hopefully it sets the stage for the next couple of minutes we're going to have together. Investing in leadership, securing futures, and bolstering benefits. Tailored strategies for lasting success. There's a lot of key words in there, but one of them that we're gonna come back to is tailoring, right? As we think about some of the topics that I'm going to cover really quickly, the idea of customization being key is really, really critical. Now, I've been in this space being sort of classically called executive benefits for over 20 years. I've been on a little bit of a crusade to change the description. And the reason is I don't like it. When we think about or we hear executive benefits, we think traditionally sometimes just the C-suite. And I want to dispel that. So I've modified the description even as a launching point. And the reason is some of the challenges we're going to talk about and ways to identify them and solve them or avoid them cascades much deeper into an organization than just your traditional C-suite. They are impacted, but it cascades much deeper. So I want the listeners to have a little bit of mindset on that. By the way, Karina, you can advance. And Karina, there's a whole group of people in the background, obviously, to make these things work. So round of applause virtually for Karina and the entire team for making this all work. So here's what I would say for sake of time, and I hope it's going to be a well-rounded, brief conversation. What we're going to talk about is some of the fundamental challenges that organizations, here's what I tell organizations. I travel around the country and I get to sit down with organizations of all shapes and all sizes, both in the for-profit sector and the not-for-profit sector. These challenges are presenting themselves constantly. Therefore, we talk about them. I tell organizations with confidence, you either have faced some of these challenges, you're facing them now, or you will face them in the future. So being prepared is also really, really important. The three are the cost of a delayed retirement. So when we think about retirement, delayed retirements, we can quantify that, but there are also impacts to the organizations that those delayed retirement executives and top talent folks are facing that are really impactful. How can we stay ahead of that? The second is one that is routine in our conversations, and that is around the cost of replacing key employees. We can quantify that. So this conversation really centers around a lot of R's, right? It's recruiting, it's retaining, it's rewarding, and retiring. The third is sometimes a blind spot for organizations until we have the conversation. Addressing group benefit shortfalls for highly compensated folks. That is an important topic. So those are the three we're going to cover pretty quickly. Thanks, Karina. Okay, there's a lot of noise on this slide here. Let me just sort of give you the key message. And this is all around delayed retirement, right? We're seeing that. We're seeing that across all income levels. So even in your top talent, higher compensated folks, we're definitely seeing that as well. And so what this is just sort of reinforcing is if I have targeted savings rates on the left and I have different income levels at the top, green obviously is good. Yellow is let's be aware, and red is bad. What this is telling us, and we've bolded a 15% target savings rate, right? We probably could agree that that is a good sort of benchmark target savings rate. At certain income levels, it is relatively easy to achieve relative to taking full utilization of the retirement plan from a savings perspective. I love what Jill and Colin were talking about with just this even expanded opportunity to utilize the retirement plan and things like Social Security. But as you move up the compensation scale, it becomes increasingly challenging and mathematically impossible to achieve target savings rates for a successful financial future, not the least of which is retirement. So what are organizations doing proactively to enable higher compensated folks an opportunity to save and save tax efficiently? Thanks, Karina. And just another point on delayed retirement, right? I alluded to it earlier. Hitting an 80% target replacement ratio, trying to save that 15% to do that. Higher compensated folks may only replace 25 to 45% using Social Security and qualified plan alone. And that is because of the IRS limitations on what can be accomplished for HCEs in a retirement plan. But I alluded to it a moment ago, that also not only clearly impacts the participant, but it also impacts the organizations that they work with and for. The reason is, for every year of a delayed retirement, it increases costs and has other implicit results from that delayed retirement. We can quantify it from a workforce cost perspective. So for every 3 years, it could drive workforce costs at the organization up to the tune of 10%. There's going to be other implications like emerging leaders cannot fill those seats because they're occupied, and that could have other implications for the organization as well. So what are organizations doing? And I don't have time to give you the full portfolio of solutions, but I want to just lean into one or two in the few minutes we have left. Thanks, Karina. Okay, so from a retirement completion perspective, what many organizations are doing, and again, this is for both not-for-profit and for-profit organizations, is to do what I describe as a sidecar retirement savings vehicle or tool in the toolbox. What I'm referring to is a non-qualified deferred compensation program. Now, this doesn't disrupt the participants that are in a program like this with how they can interact and utilize the 401k retirement plan. What it essentially does is provides them an additional opportunity to save more in a tax efficient environment. When I say tax efficient, what I'm really referring to is pre-tax savings or pre-tax deferrals and tax deferred growth, right? And a non-qualified plan does that and does that very well. In addition, the IRS limitations imposed in qualified retirement programs do not exist in the non-qualified deferred compensation world. So the opportunity for a participant to save more is certainly there in a non-qualified plan. And one other thing I'll mention on this is there's an opportunity to not only save more, but save for, yes, a successful retirement, but also save for life events that occur prior to retirement. That's represented in the visual there. You may be able to see that college savings, building or buying the vacation home. There are tools within deferred compensation that allow for penalty-free withdrawals while employed that can really promote having that additional financial security for those events that may be coming up prior to retirement. And there's also investment flexibility. So oftentimes, the same menu in the 401k plan or the 403b plan that participants are interacting with is mirrored, replicated over into the non-qualified plan, and allows that investment customization from that perspective for each participant. Thanks, Karina. Okay, those are really, really small letters. Here's what I'll tell you they represent. Recently, there was a survey, a series of surveys. We went out to CEOs and CFOs, C-suite leaders across the globe, and asked them, what are the things that are keeping you up at night? And there's a whole host of things, right? It could be staying with technology and technology momentum. It could be innovation. There's a whole series of things that are top of mind for executives and top talent leaders. But the shaded boxes represent one that just keeps coming up and keeps coming up at the top. And that is attracting and retaining top talent. So that will not go away. We've seen some softening in the labor market, but the competition and the recruitment efforts in those top talent areas is very tight, and we expect that to continue. So one of the reasons this is such an ongoing concern is to not only have the right people in the right roles, but to avoid the cost of replacing those people and losing them to a competitor or otherwise. Part of the reason for that is it is very expensive, as I'm sure that many of you that are listening would agree with. And we can quantify that. That cost of losing a top talent person can cost 2 to 4 times that employee's annual compensation. So it is very easy to quietly and quickly bleed dollars out of an organization from losing someone in those categories. So what are organizations doing to sort of try to stay ahead of that, put glue in the seats of their top talent people and keep them? Karina, you can advance. Thank you. I'm going to come back to a form of compensation that is very prevalent and, again, can be tailored and customized to your organization and to those specific roles. We're seeing more and more of what I describe categorically as long-term incentive plans, right? As a form of compensation to incentivize those folks to stay and to also drive the kind of behavior that you need and want out of those roles to really propel the organization on a continued upward track. There are a lot of ways to create a long-term incentive program. One of those is to utilize a non-qualified deferred compensation program that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And the primary driver to that would be through discretionary employer contributions that can be, again, customized to the participant. And we also see vesting schedules be a key component to this, right? And we see vesting schedules both be time-based vesting. We also see those vesting schedules be more performance-based vesting. So to my comment a minute ago on them really being customizable, that is true both from a time-based vesting perspective as well as a performance-based vesting perspective, and pre-tax contributions and grow tax deferred. And oftentimes participants can interact with when those dollars are paid back to them and customize that from a scheduling perspective. I will say one comment about non-qualified deferred compensation plans is they're not for all employees in an organization by design and by rule. Generally, these deferred compensation programs would include up to your top 20% as ranked by compensation. But it can be very flexible from that perspective as well. Okay, so we've talked about 2 of the 3. One has been delayed retirement, and just a few insights around that, because that is a real challenge faced by many organizations. And then the second one is retention, recruiting and retaining top talent, mission critical. And what I'm going to close with is this benefit equalization and restoration topic. And that is addressing the shortfalls that are oftentimes, if not in most instances, unintentional, right? So if we think about that, what you see on screen here is things like the group long-term disability program, things like the group life insurance program. These are great programs, But what happens is, in almost all instances, formulaically, they are capped in the amount of benefit that may be provided to the participants, right? So group long-term disability, simple example. In most instances, that benefit program is intending to replace 60% of an employee's compensation during a long-term disability event. The challenge is those programs are capped. So in many instances, it may be, look, formulaically, it's we're going to replace 60% of someone's compensation, but it's capped at $10,000 a month. So for, by and large, for many, if not most employees in your organization, that is a tremendous benefit during an event like a long-term disability, which, by the way, in the United States happens about every 7 seconds. None of us think it's going to happen to me. I didn't, for sake of time. I don't really have time to tell you the stories, but it happens. And so you may have a CFO, you may have a CEO, someone in the top talent category that thinks they're going to have 60% replaced in a long-term disability. They may only get 25% because of that monthly cap. There are ways to pinpoint, calculate, and solve that problem by stacking on supplemental disability programs through things like guaranteed issue, underwriting, and things like those. These programs are all portable when the executive, the employee leaves or retires or otherwise. And it's a similar conversation with the group life insurance program as well, to get a program for those higher compensated folks more commensurate with their roles and compensation. I simply pose organizations this question: do you want an environment in your organization where each employee, regardless of role, compensation, or title, has equitable access to the benefit programs? This is what we're talking about, in ways to equalize the benefit programs across your entire organization. I think, Karina, we can, for sake of time, I think we can advance beyond this. Thank you. I'm sure you will all have access to this information. It provides a little bit more detail on some of the programs that I just described. Okay, and finally, I want to talk about something that is really, really relevant, and that is long-term care. And why is later too late? Organizations are socializing this and solving this problem because it is a problem. There are multiple factors that have come together to really drive the awareness on how to solve this problem. A few of them are changing demographics. We have 10,000 baby boomers retiring daily until probably sometime around 2032. We also know that from a long-term care need perspective, statistically speaking, 70% of people over the age of 65 will need long-term care support during their lifetime. We also know it is very expensive. Those expenses are likely to continue to rise and increase. It's easy to get to six-figure numbers when long-term care is needed for a loved one or for ourselves. In addition, there's shrinking standalone long-term care options out there. There's still a private market where any one of us could go out and try to secure a long-term care policy, but the challenge is we have to successfully navigate through the medical underwriting process, and that is very rigorous for long-term care, and then it can be very expensive. So what we're seeing now is organizations rolling a voluntary life insurance with long-term care program out to their entire workforce. And we're seeing incredibly encouraging participation rates. Part of the reason for that is this program can extend not only to each employee, but to their spouses, to their children and grandchildren. So it allows an opportunity for an employee through guaranteed issue underwriting, no medical questions, medical history is irrelevant, to secure protection and peace of mind for the likelihood of long-term care support being needed. And so if you haven't socialized this or are unaware where we are relative to an opportunity to address this problem and bolster benefits in your organizations, we would love to engage with you on that. And I mentioned the products today are really dual purpose and provides even additional benefit regardless of your age, What I mean by that is it is a life insurance policy with a series of monthly long-term care tax-free benefits. And these are locked in when the employee, from a price perspective, they are locked in when the employee has the policy issued, payroll deducted. It's portable. They take it with them when they retire or leave the organization. Tremendously powerful products available in today's marketplace. Okay, so we have talked about a couple of hopefully important topics to you as you think about your organizations. We love to have these conversations looking through the lens of the challenges that are out there, and then secondarily, how can we address them? The way I would wrap it up is by saying this entire conversation can be really represented in 3 words. I call it the formula to all of this, and that is the PEP approach. And that is, P is for provide. So providing wealth building accumulation strategies for all employees on an equalized playing field. So the 401k plan, the non-qualified deferred compensation plan is 2 simple examples of that. The next is, so that's P is provide. The next is E for enhance. That's representative of this conversation around long-term incentive programs to really drive strategic, customized retention and using different forms of compensation to enhance the entire benefit package for your top talent and your executives. And the third is protect, right? So it's not only accumulating, but it is also protecting not only those assets that have accumulated while employed, but also just protection from a risk management perspective, right? And that introduces the topics like long-term disability, life insurance, and long-term care as 3 examples of that. So it is the entire equation of a successful career for your valuable employees, particularly as it relates to problems that present themselves because they're in this top talent, higher compensated arena. So with that, Jill, I'm 3 minutes over my scheduled time, so I want to be respectful of everyone. I moved quickly. I don't know if there's questions or you have any comments or thoughts.
I do. Thank you so much. So yes, I have a big German Shepherd too. If you would advance just a second, Karina, we can see the photos that Kurt put on there. It's cute. I think you just push page down and maybe the photos come on. Anyway, yeah, there we go.
I had a lot of stories here, Jill. Yeah. So for sake of time, I'm not going to dive in, but that is Axel, and we will come back to these stories on another day.
Yes, I can't wait to hear, and anyone can't wait to hear. So while you're on, so I'm going to link this to you in a minute, but I like this LinkedIn question because it says, what range are you considering? Long story short, if someone's only making 18 an hour, and they have to pay for health insurance, there's no way to be able to save funds for a meaningful retirement. Well, this, I wish I knew your name. This goes back, and I actually wrote this down, so I didn't have to look too far. On page 78, Social Security accounts for 64% of pre-retirement income for lower earners. So this participant, if they make $18 an hour for their entire career, will have 64 replacement ratio of their pre-retirement income. So they probably don't need to do much more than between 6 and 10% of their income in their 401k, if this is their fact set. However, I also wrote this down. By the time you're earning $300,000, Social Security accounts for 14% of your pre-retirement income. And this is why it's so important to tailor your benefits for the 2 types of employees. So through employee education, we can explain to someone making 18 an hour or low earners why it's important to save a little, name your beneficiary, invest wisely in a target date fund, set it and forget it. You're going to be on track. But as Kurt's mentioning, the more the leaders make, the more your senior leaders make, the more you want to keep them, retain them. That's when you need something more customized, like he shared. So what is the normal income level or is it a percentage of employees that you would see covered by these executive benefits, Kurt?
Yeah, great question, Jill. So I would say just quickly that the non-qualified deferred comp plan, allowing participants in those higher comp categories to do more tax efficiently. Where we generally see at income levels, participants start to take advantage of the sidecar deferred comp plan is probably in the 175,000 and above, right? Because that is sort of the space where you start being impacted by the limitations on the other benefit programs, and you really start seeing that present itself.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap this up. You can stay on, or I'm going to wrap it up. Most important to me after today, it's a half hour. You're so fortunate to have learned from these educators. Anyone on the call today or on the recording, I think that this is such extremely important amount of information to learn, to benefit for your own employees and yourself. What I took away is it's so important to tailor your plan. Tailor your plan. John started out, you got to tailor the plan document to your plan. So we can help you with that. We can help you tailor your plan document to who you want to benefit, what compensation makes sense for you. I think you began to realize really early in the 3 hours that everybody's plan is different. And then we talk about minimizing fiduciary risks. We really want to protect all your participants. So we want to make sure the benefits are correct for your participants, the investments are right for your participants, cybersecurity is right, that they have a named beneficiary. All of this falls into employee education. And you learned from Amanda, you cannot do employee education in 30 minutes. We would all benefit from hearing Amanda twice a year for the rest of our life. So employee education is also not set it and forget it. Plan design is not set it and forget it. Compensation is not set it and forget it. What you learn from an expert like Amanda is not set it and forget it. And then, of course, segmenting your needs. What I learned from Kurt is completely different from what I've learned from everyone else, because you got to segment the needs based on tenure, based on age, based on income. What else did I write? Based on savers, your high savers. They could be a new hire, but a high saver, maybe they would want managed accounts. Maybe they'd want the mega Roth. So again, everything is tailored. It's what keeps my job fun. It's what keeps me bringing education to you as plan sponsors. So I really do remain optimistic about the future. I remain optimistic about your future as plan sponsors. We can keep tailoring the retirement plans, 401k, 403b, 457, to your participants' needs, to your corporate philosophy. And I gave you just a couple ideas of benefits you can add at no cost. No cost is always fun, and employee education and different ways to promote the plan. Again, no cost with a benefit that might be no cost as well. So I encourage your questions. I think it's again, thank you to our sponsors, page 127. And then Karina, just finishing up, I think my email's at the bottom, but I think there's no shortage of ways in which you can get in touch with us. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed your questions to the right. I can tell a lot of you knew Kurt already, like Donna. That's so nice. So see, I met him for the first time today. So thank you for all your questions. Thank you for all your insight today. And I welcome any emails or any questions that you may have about your own plan. Thank you so much for today. And thanks, Nick and Karina, for all your hard work with the administration and flipping the slides for me, Karina. Thank you.